So welcome to today's show. Jerry and I are joined by yet another legend of local football, the one and only Paul McVeigh. Paul, how are you doing? And welcome to the show.
Good man. So I'm doing really well. I think the preview for this show is probably going to take longer than the actual show is going to take, but for the last hour and a half that we've been on, and then hopefully the show will be a little bit less than that, right?
Yeah. Good to have you on board, Paul. Thanks very much for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
I have to say that this has been made possible by your cousin and a good friend of mine, Noel McVeigh. Noel obviously didn't play football, so the football side of the family was yourself and young Tony and Nicholl. Noel is actually but the best, if you like, club man in the world. In terms of committee man, you couldn't get a better one, Paul. He's different class, and he didn't even tell me to say that.
No, I know that's the thing. It's like, you know, some of us are winning Player of the Year and some of us are winning Club Man of the Year. as long as I was getting the Player of the Year, then that's all right. I'm happy with that.
But he definitely got Club Man of the Year, about 10 years running. And I have to say, you were in Norwich, and we'll talk about that in a second, but your cousin's son, Michael, is the only Norwich City fan I know in my entire life. Is that a fair point?
That's what happens around Belfast. I actually was driving around the street, because I'm living up in Dunmurry, and I was driving around the street the other day, and I thought I saw some guy walking down with a Norwich shirt. I'm like, it can't be a Norwich shirt as like in Dunmurry. This is ridiculous. And then as I got closer and closer, I saw it was like a Puma badge, and I saw the yellow and green. I think it was like Cliftonville's away top.
It's a new away.
That's right.
I was like, oh, not quite Norwich though.
Brilliant. So Paul, let's just start by you giving us a wee bit of history on yourself from maybe growing up, and then how you've gone across the water, and then we'll move on to what you're doing today.
Okay. So I basically, you know, grew up in the West and just having, you know, kind of the normal life that you do whenever you're going to John the Baptist Primary School, playing football every day, going to St Mary's, playing football every day until, you know, you just someone, I was actually, whenever my dad came back and said to me, did I want to go and join a team up in Lisburn? And again, I had no idea who it was. I was only 11. I remember going up to this first night playing up in Lisburn Youth, and obviously once I told my mates I'm going to play for Lisburn Youth, they were like, oh, they're all Protestants up there, are you going to go to them? I was like, I know, I was playing football. Anyway, walked into the change room and just felt so uncomfortable, because you're kind of sitting there and no one's speaking. Obviously I knew they were Protestants, like, you know, 15 Protestant fellas in the change room. I'm there by myself, just me. And then about 2 minutes later, we all started chatting, and then that was it for the rest of my life. It just, this whole barrier of no they're on the other side and they're weird and got 3 heads and all the rest of it. And after 2 minutes of being in the change room, my entire view of Protestants, the whole Protestant life, it just completely changed for the better, obviously. And suddenly I'm playing it for Lisburn Youth, and so it was my first night training. I remember just doing what you do when you're a kid, just going out and enjoying yourself. And that first night training up in Barber playing fields, basically there was a Spurs scout at the training and there was a Liverpool scout at the training. And it turns out that the story goes that because the Spurs scout was a little bit quicker than the older Liverpool scout, that Spurs scout around quicker than my dad and said, listen, love your son to go over to play for Spurs and train with Spurs, and it's kind of the rest is history, as they say.
Absolutely brilliant. And what age was that, Paul? What age were you?
11. I was 11.
11 years of age.
Yeah. And it's funny because the Liverpool scout was the grandfather of one of the kids in the team, a guy called Steve McGuire, and his grandfather was Jimmy McAlinden. Obviously,
for Belfast Celtic, did he?
So yeah. So absolute legend. Talk about he was playing professional football and just being there, seen it and done it. And obviously, I didn't realise as an 11-year-old kid, this guy had an amazing career in football. And yeah, because he was a wee bit older than the Spurs scout and get around the Spurs scout ass first. Went over that summer over to Spurs, the kind of first introduction into this whole world of professional football. And it was so funny because they used to have a youth development officer, was the guy who kind of would take the young kids over and look after, make sure they're in the digs, make sure they got the training. And on my first day I got there, a guy called John McCurr, John McCurr, the West Ham player, it was his dad. And he ended up, welcome to Spurs, blah, blah, blah. See, Alan Sugar's Rolls Royce parked out the front because he was the chairman at the time, and walked into the reception, John standing there. And he says, oh, listen, you're not going training today. This is the first day I've ever been at a professional football team. You're not going training today. I said, why not? He goes, have you ever heard of Paul Gascoigne? And I was like, what? Yeah, absolutely. So this is just after the 1990 World Cup. And he goes, the Sun are here and they need a player to come on the pitch and be in an advert with Paul Gascoigne. Do you want to do it? And I was like, absolutely, because Gaza was my hero at the time. Absolutely loved Gaza. Just, everybody just loved Gaza. He was funny. He was, best player, best thing ever. 1990 was, incredible for him. Put him on the world stage right at the very top of the tree. Suddenly, do you want to play with Paul Gascoigne? I'm like, yes, absolutely, love to. And he's like, brilliant. So the only thing is, I know you're from, Belfast and your background. He goes, so you have to wear an England kit? I'm like, no. There's no way in the world I'm wearing. I'll get killed when I go home. I can't do it. They go, so pay you £200. Like, where they say? So, and it was amazing. And it's funny now because I don't actually have that video. I don't have any footage of it. And I didn't know why I didn't get a copy of it. I don't know how I didn't, get hold of it in some way. And it's only because my dad hopefully won't be watching this, but my dad's a massive Doris Day fan. Because he was watching the Doris Day movie, Send Me No Flowers, one time on the TV, and he was just recorded it. For anybody watching this, he used to record things on a tape. Anyway, but like kind of streaming on Netflix, but sort of old-fashioned. Anyway, and he was recording Send Me No Flowers, Doris Day movie, and in the advert was my advert with Paul Gascoigne for the Sun.
No way.
And that's the only copy I have it, and it's actually on that bookshelf over there. That I still have to get it converted from a videotape onto some sort of digital method so that I can actually share it on my social media. And yeah.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
And so did you travel back and forward every summer, Paul?
Hold on. Jerry's trying to get a word in here. I feel bad. Sorry, you never talk to Jerry, do you?
Well, I was going to say, when I was down at Managerial in Newry, there was a guy called Marty McVeigh. I think he's still the Spurs scout now. Now, he would have been later after you had signed. You don't know Marty, do you?
I don't know. The guy who was the Spurs scout with me was a guy called Rob Walker.
Right.
So, but no, I don't know Marty, no.
And did you sign when you were 11, or did you just go back and forward for...
You couldn't sign at that stage, and that the earliest you could do anything was 14 when you had schoolboy forms. But I just kept going across like every summer holiday, winter break, every time there was a break in school, and it was just like just keep getting used to it. It was funny because all the way through, and it's really interesting. I'm sure we'll come to it later on. But now I'm a keynote speaker and I kind of travel around the world doing it. But I'm also train people how to become keynote speakers. So if the people want to kind of do what I do, then we're training them. And I had a conversation with Quinton Fortune the other day. So Quinton's obviously Manchester United now, he's the under-23s coach. And I was just speaking to him and chatting. And I said, Quinton, you won't remember me, but whenever I came over to Spurs as a kid, so he must have been 14 and Spurs signed him for £1 million. In the early 90s, Quinton Fortune was literally the best young player on the planet. So when I was 11, he's 3 years older than me, I was coming over. And because he was the same age as a guy called Stephen Robinson, who you'll probably know, who was the assistant to Michael O'Neill and stuff. And Robbo played for Lisburn Youth, and Robbo first went over to Spurs through Rob Walker. And so Robbo was the same age as Quinton. So every time I went over with Robbo, we all trained together and I met Quinton. And it's amazing to see this kid that has a 14-year-old who they brought over from South Africa. And I'm thinking, oh my God, look at this. They're paying £1 million for him. This little 4-3-2 short arse, like they're paying peanuts for. But yeah, he just kept coming over every summer. And I was training with the likes of Nicky Barmby and Saul Campbell and all those boys. So yeah, amazing time, because Spurs had a real reputation. It was almost like Spurs and United at that stage were the two best youth teams in the country.
Absolutely. And then you end up saying, did you sign YTS at 14 or 16 it would have been?
So it's funny because whenever I look back on it now, all of the contracts that I kind of had signed at Spurs were all the minimum they could give me. Really funny. Kind of should have taken it. It's a bit like when you keep asking a girl to go out with you and she's just like, oh yeah, but it never actually ever goes out. It's like, whenever it's, Jerry, you must know what that's like.
That never happened to me.
But it's like, it's because they give me a 2-year, what I call schoolboy forms, 14 to 16, but no guarantee of a youth team contract. Then when I got to 16, they give me a 2-year youth team contract with no guarantee of a pro. And then when I got through my youth team, again, I was the last player to be decided upon, because all our players like Stephen Clements and Luke Young and all these other players who were coming through and becoming established Premier League players, obviously further on in their careers, all got like longer contracts. And I got a 1-year contract. And it was only at the end of that year, I won't bore you with all the rest of the story, but I finally made my debut up front for Spurs against Wed Villa, actually up front with Teddy Sheringham. And it was just amazing, considering I was the lowest paid player at the club at the time. And I ended up making my debut, against Gareth Southgate was playing centre half, and God rest him, Ugo Ekiog as well. And they had like Dwight York up front and Mark Bosnich and in goal, and so that amazing team they had. And then finally got my home debut at Coventry on the last game of the season and managed to put in a little header from 2 yards out whenever Teddy hit a 30-yard free kick off the post, and I just tapped it in.
Brilliant.
It's funny you say that, because I would dare say your first professional contract was maybe £250 a week, if even that. 200. And I'll tell you how I know. Obviously, I signed professional forms with Hull City when I was 17, but mine was £95 a week. I had to pay national insurance, tax, and my digs out of it. But one of your ex-teammates, Philip Moran, I think his first contract at United was 200, 300 and 400, a 3-year pro deal he signed. And he got me in Tiernan Lynch tickets to a United game one time, I remember, and I gave him a pair of Armani sunglasses. Now, they were about £160. The tickets would have been cheaper. I actually still think he has them, run the boat run with the minute with them, but I give him as a thank you. And he couldn't get over it that I'd give him these sort of sunglasses. But I remember reading something else, that he was on the bench for the quarter-final against, I think it was Juventus, the year United won the European Cup, and his bonus was something like 12,500. It was a quarter-final of the Champions League when he was on the bench. As I say, but people think when you're professional at Spurs or Manchester United, back in those days, you were on maybe stupid money. But you weren't. It was a few £100 a week. It was the players that they signed in for money. A young lad of, as I say, Quinton Fortune, I would dare say he was on a lot of money at Spurs, but the young lads who through the YTS weren't given big money at all.
No, absolutely. And I think for some reason I can remember that even Teddy Sheringham, who was the previous year, so I joined in '94, it was the year Spurs signed Klinsmann, and I joined that year, and I think Teddy might have been the Golden Boot winner the previous season, and I think that the rumours were on he was about £5,000 a week. and he would have been one of the top paid players in the whole country, you know, because he was Golden Boot winner, he was England striker, he was, you know, just top of the tree, and that was about £5,000 a week at the time, which obviously was huge money. And then a couple of years later, Arsenal signed Dennis Bergkamp from Inter, and suddenly, you know, I think he went up to about 50 a week and just smashed this pay structure, and then everybody started, you know, coming in also, and then Shearer started obviously banging in the goals, and yeah, and then the whole pay scale went out the window.
Yeah, I remember being out with Wes Brown one night, and he was telling me that he had made his England debut, and I think they'd won the Champions League, and he was only on £5,000 a week at that particular time, and he went in to see Alex Ferguson, and he had offered him 12,500, and he came into the changing room as you do, and he was talking to Roy Keane, and Keane says, "Well, hold on a second." So Keane went in with him, and the deal that he got him was 25,000 a week. Now it was after that. Obviously, I think it was I can't remember what year, but he went from, I think it was 300 or 400 a week to £5,000 to 25,000 a week.
But then listen, if you're in a squad that's winning Champions League and you're winning Premier League, I mean, I think that is fully deserved. And this is the difference, you know. This is where, you know, I'm not trying to be modest in any way, but there's all the scale of football of where you're at, and it's just, you need to be realistic. You know, if people going in and asking for silly money when they can be easily replaced, and, you know, reason why Roy Keane and Shearer and all the rest of them get the top money is because they can't be replaced. Other people can't do what they can do. So it's like whenever I think about the kind of wages that I was on, even whenever I got to the Premier League, and I only played about 20 odd games in the Premier League. So I say let's say I'm at the very first step of the Premier League ladder. And then you have someone who's played maybe 100 games, 200, maybe even 500 games in the Premier League, but they might have played for like Birmingham or Ipswich or Charlton. You know, it's like decent teams, but they're not the big teams. And then suddenly you find someone who's played 200, 300, 400 games for, let's say, a top 6 team, an Everton, an Arsenal, Liverpool, who, you know, still weren't what they are at the minute. And then you kind of put it into some sort of perspective, and then you go like to someone who was winning league titles, might have won one league title, and then suddenly there's like a 5 league, and then you just keep going up the scale until you get like even someone like Ryan Giggs, and you're going, Ryan Giggs is the most decorated player in British football in history. Won more Premier League titles, more top league titles, and 2 European Cups and FA Cups, and he's still not even in the bracket of Ronaldo and Messi. And he never gets a look in. That's the scary thing. No. The best player that's ever been in the history of English football doesn't get a look in when Ronaldo and Messi are mentioned. And that's why I think whatever money they're getting, they deserve it, because I know what it took for me to get 20 games and 2 goals, and they're doing it pretty much consistently for the last 15 years. Deserve all the money in the world.
100%. I was actually on to an ex-player last night, Vincent Sweeney. Vincent done I don't know whether you were aware, but he done a thing last week where he ran 4 mile every 4 hours for 48 hours. So he's into he's like the new Wayne Goggins Goggins thing. So this Friday he's going to run 100. He's never done a marathon before, but he's going to run 100 mile in 24 hours. Now I played against him when we were playing. He played for Cliftonville Crusaders and Ballymena, and he'll openly say, like, he was mad when he was younger. He was just a rocket. He wanted to fight everyone and stuff. We're speaking to him last night, someone who's just changed his whole life around. You know, I come off the phone this morning. I wanted to run a marathon myself, just speaking to him for like a 20-minute call. He was amazing. But he says, Jerry, like, the body, you only do 40% of what your body will let you do. There's an extra 60% in there. He says, like, I've never run a marathon before, but I can guarantee you I'll finish the 100 mile in 24 hours, which he's about to do on Friday. But see, just on the wages thing, I remember being with Philip.
Yeah.
Moran.
Father Philip.
Father Philip is right.
Father Philip. But myself and Tiernan Lynch and I think it was Jared Little were with him the night he was in the Northern Ireland under-21 squad at the time, and we were with him the night up in the chimney corner that the facts and everything came through that he signed for Norwich. Okay. And as I say, he openly told us that he was on I think his 3-year contract with United, 200, 300, 400, and I think his first wage basic, he went from the 400 on his 3rd year at United to 7,000 at Norwich, the first contract that he ever signed. Because Norwich ended up, I think they paid 500,000 or something for him. Would it be right? Back in that day, yeah.
99, yeah, remember that.
Yeah.
I was
probably rooming with him at the time whenever we were doing
it. When you sang for Norwich, you were getting that an hour.
Listen, we all have different paths going through football, but I'll give you one last story. You probably heard this, but just in case you haven't, it's in football and folklore when it comes to negotiations and wages and stuff. And again, don't know if it's true, but let's just pretend it is. Because this was whenever, you remember Leeds in the late 90s were just buying everybody. They bought Ferdinand for 30 million and all of it. Anyway, buying all the best young players. And have you heard the one about Seth Johnson coming from Derby? Be surprised if you haven't heard this one, because the story goes that basically Seth Johnson was a really good, solid player at Derby, left back. Let's say, I think he was on about $6,000 a week at the time. So late 90s, you know, decent wages, very good young player, just about to get in the England squad. But of course, because Leeds had this kind of policy of just buying up the best young talent, thinking, you know, in 4 or 5 years' time, they're going to be league winners. So Seth Johnson and his agent turned up at Leeds United to go in and negotiate his contract. And so they've walked into the chief exec's office of the chairman, Peter Ridsdale, and effectively they're sitting there, and their plan was for negotiating was like, we're going to ask for double our wages. So we're going to go in, we're at 6 at the minute, we're going to go in and ask for 12. So anyway, Seth's sitting there, they walk into the chairman's office, and they introduce himself, right, Peter, this is Seth, the agent, right, okay, listen, Peter, let me just tell you, and he goes, let me stop you right there. This is Leeds United, we do not negotiate. 33 grand a week, take it or leave it. He's like, I need a minute to confirm the plan. Apparently they were outside the door doing a little jig, and they're just absolutely delighted. Apparently they went back and they were like 37 a week, and they ended up with 35 or something like that. It's just going
absolutely brilliant.
Amazing. Honestly, that story is like folklore through football. It's always like you always let someone else go first in negotiations, what they're going to go with.
Whoever mentioned
when he I think when he left, Paul, didn't he? He ended up playing for someone else after Leeds, and they were still paying him about 4 or 5 years after.
Leeds was still paying Robbie Fowler, was still paying Robbie King, still playing all those boys all the time. It was ridiculous. Even my mate Darren Huckerby was there at that time when they were in the Champions League semi-final and all. They were just like, he said it was ridiculous. No wonder the club was in financial ruin for the next kind of 15, 20 years. You know, only probably just getting back to where Leeds United should be at the minute, you know, and obviously who knows what's going to happen with them.
What's going to happen?
Noel McVeigh will be delighted to hear that. Mr. Leeds. So, Paul, tell us, did you play with Klinsmann at Spurs? But did you only see him pitch as him?
So only the first part that I ever had, with the only real kind of interaction I had with Klinsmann was because they signed him first day of the season after the night, because he just started in the 94 World Cup. Obviously, he's already World Cup winner with West Germany in 1990. And whenever he turned up for training in his little Volkswagen Beetle, and all the press are there, now, because the press are there, they want to see him do, they can't just be in his jumper and jeans, you know, so they were like, right, can you go train? Can we get you into some sort of Spurs training gear? So because the first team weren't back yet, and the youth team all turned up first day before everyone else, we had to go and get changed, get training, and train. There used to be a little gym to the side of White Hart Lane where we go and do our sort of indoor sessions when it was snowing and stuff. And so all of the youth team and Jurgen Klinsmann went in and trained for our first day training. But it was mad because, you know, this is where I'm standing next to a World Cup winner. Like, this guy just looked like an absolute rock star, you know, just like good-looking guy, over 6 foot, long blonde hair, obviously multi-millionaire, just came from the Italian league, you know, and obviously the Italian league was kind of where it was at in the kind of early 90s. And I just remember just sitting looking at this guy, just going, just off a boat from Belfast, thinking, you know, if that's what it takes to be a Premier League international footballer, I have no chance in the world. And it's really sad because you have this kind of like, almost like a
inferiority complex.
It's an inferiority complex that I had, probably whether it was my height or coming from Belfast, I don't really know, but for whatever reason, I had something that whenever I saw him, I was like, if that's what it takes to be a professional footballer and a first team player and international, I've got no chance. And it's really, it's only now when you kind of look back on it, you know, kind of 20 years later, you start to kind of analyse it a bit. And because my whole kind of passion and what I most love in my kind of work life is all around psychology and mental performance. So obviously for the last 10 years, you know, I've kind of been reading about this. I've written a book on it, you know, kind of speak about it when I'm doing my keynote speaking. I did my master's in it. So, you know, I've done a lot of research in it. And it's this belief that I picked up as a young man. And it was only whenever in the next couple of years, talking about the youth team, in our youth team, we had a guy called Rory Allen. Now, Rory Allen was just the best player in our team. You know, he was kind of striker, always scored the goals, always get into the reserves from the youth team first. He was always the first player to get into the next stage. So when the youth team, you get into the reserves, and then whenever I finally, you know, got through the youth team, 1 year contract, £200 a week, sort of lowest paid player at the club. And then by later on that season, by about Christmas time, Rory had made his debut against Man United live on Sky Sports under the lights, White Hart Lane. So he's playing against Beckham, Giggs, Scholes, Keane, that, you know, amazing late 90s team. And I remember watching my mate, who I just come through the 2 years in the youth team with, and on his debut, live on Sky, he scores against United. And I was just like, delighted. I was buzzing. I was so happy for him. My mate scored a goal. All the youth team lads all together. But the funny thing was that whenever I saw him score a goal, it was like a little switch went off in my head. And I just suddenly thought, wow, if he can do that, then so can I. Because it's because your peer has done it. It's like your mate, he's your colleague. It's not like Jurgen Klinsmann who was up here. And it was like that little flick of a switch. And suddenly I just thought, wow, okay, so it is possible. And within 3 months, I made my Premier League debut. And then 2 games later, scored my first goal in the Premier League. And just like, amazing how these things happen. But it's only, I don't know if you've ever come across Steve Jobs' graduation speech at Stanford, but he basically talks about a couple of different things. And one of the things he mentions about, you can't join the dots going forward. You can only join the dots going back. And it's only whenever you look back and think, well, actually, it's because Rory scored that goal against Man United that I created this belief that it's possible, and then I made my debut. It's really funny. Really
Absolutely.
Yeah, amazing.
And how then did you end up leaving Spurs? I know, you know, you played 20 or so games. How did it come?
That's in my entire career. Played 20 games in the Premier League, so 3 with Spurs and about 20 odd with Norwich 5 years later. So how did it come about that you went to Norwich? So whenever I'd made my debut, I kind of came home, and you know the way, or probably you can imagine that feeling that Mario Götze had when he scored the winning goal in the World Cup final in 2014. Do you remember whenever Germany beat, Argentina in the final? And you just like, whatever that feeling must have been, I probably had that when I scored that goal when we lost 2-1 against Coventry in the last day of the season. So I pretty much went home and thought I was a World Cup winner, and I was like partying and celebrating down at the M Club and out in every bar and Lavery's and just the whole time. And my dad's going, "Oh, so you have to be on some training?" And I'm like, no, it's okay. I'll do that whenever I get home, and just not really thinking anything about it until eventually I get back to pre-season, overweight, unfit, never recovered, never played another game for the Spurs first team, never got another sniff. And that was it until eventually George Graham took over, and David Pleat eventually was there, and basically just went, you're a bit too small for the Premier League, even though it already made my debut in the Premier League, but it was a bit too small for the Premier League. Need to find another club. And luckily, Brian Hamilton was the manager up at Norwich at the time, and obviously Philly was there, and phoned him up and just said, "Brian, getting released from Spurs. Were you interested in having a look at me?" And went up, had a 3-day trial, and after 1 day's training, he says, "We'll offer you a 1-year contract." Right. On $700 a week at this time. 700? This is a big jump. But obviously it was all more at Spurs, and then came back down again when I went to Norwich. And then do you get a longer contract after the first year? No, I was so because I'd made my debut after that couple of games that I played my first year pro, and then signed another 3-year pro at Spurs on decent money. And then whenever kind of that obviously didn't go anywhere, and then dropped all the way back down again, because when I went to Norwich and they were like, you haven't really done anything, you haven't played first team football for 3 years, we'll give you like £700 a week. And then did that for a year, did okay in the reserves, and then Brian Hamilton gets sacked, Nigel Worthington came in, and again, hadn't really established. I was like 22 by that stage, so it was, on the borderline of kind of just falling off a cliff edge, because it just wasn't happening. And then eventually got another 1 year contract, I think, on £800 a week, because they think they have to offer you more than what you initially have. And then it kind of got to a point where Nigel Worthington was like, nah, it's not for us. You don't really have what it takes, what we're looking for, so you need to leave. And that was like, that was a bit of a shock, because it was gone from, thought I'd done well at Spurs, then got sort of the disappointment there, then got the Norwich, and then had the disappointment again of getting basically released and let go, until eventually we had a game against Watford the end of that week. So Worthington told me on the Monday that it was basically let me go, and on the Friday he phoned me and said, listen, we've got a few injuries, need you to be subbed for the match at the weekend. And sure enough, like, I turned up in the game and there was only, I think, 4 or 5 subs, so I was one of them. And I remember going out and sitting on the bench, because obviously I was just making up the numbers. And then with about 20 minutes to go, 1-0 down against Watford, and he turned around and he was like, McVeigh, get on there. And I was like, just so surprised, because you're thinking, well, I'm only making up the numbers, but you wanted me to go on the pitch. But I thought, 20 minutes to go, I'm probably never going to play at Carrow Road again. I'd only played 3 times by that stage. Going to give it everything. And I just remember going on and just kind of, when you have like one of those games where just kind of everything seems to fall into place for you. And I just remember going past a couple of players in the left wing, big diagonal crossing on the left foot, guy headed in, one each, and then another little dribble, set up a second one. Ian Roberts scored the winner right in injury time, and then just delighted, because obviously I made a great impact, but I'm still getting released. I think it was going to Barry on the Monday, or Oldham, one of them two, because my mate had sorted it out for me. And I was like, right, disappointed, into the changing room. Everyone's celebrating, beers, music, but I know I'm leaving, so I'm kind of like not really in the mood. And I remember just getting changed, coming back out and walking past the manager, and he kind of stopped me. He kind of like physically stopped me from leaving, because the door was here and he obviously changed next to the door, physically stopped me from leaving. But I should probably tell you at this point, Nigel Worthington had this really unusual habit of getting dressed from the top down. So he had on like a shirt and tie and jacket, and then was kind of
nothing else.
So he kind of put his arm out and stopped me, and I just kind of looked at him. And this is the worst part. He kind of looked me in the eye, and then he kind of looked down. And he just was like, oh, you did well out there, oh, wee man. Come in on Monday. All you've got to do is get your head down. I was like, I really want to be a professional footballer. But let me tell you, there's a line. The line is here.
Draw the line.
But it was funny, because at that point, it was like, I just stopped thinking, why am I letting some guy's opinion define whether I think I'm capable? Because I kind of knew that I had enough, because I'd already played for Spurs. I was doing well in the reserves. I couldn't really go anywhere else. I just had to be given a chance. And I started that next season, because that was around March, April time. Started the next season. I didn't do what I did after my debut at Spurs. Trained every day, all the summer, got myself into really good shape, come back for pre-season. I was fit, but I wasn't playing. And we got trounced down in Millwall in the first game of the season, 4-0. First home game of the season against Kevin Keegan's Man City, who'd just been relegated from the Premier League. And with like 10 minutes gone in the match, suddenly our left winger fractured his cheekbone. So he got stretchered off, unfortunately, and Worthington turned around and goes, right, man, go and play left wing, even though I was a striker. He says, go and play left wing. So I went on, played the whole game left wing and scored. Phil actually set up my goal. We went 1-0 up with about 10 minutes to go. Mark Libra scored the best first goal I've ever seen on anybody scoring. It flicked it over. What do you call him? I can't remember that big defender. He used to play Steve Harry, is it? He used to pass off, kicked over his head, and put a pass to Nicholl Weaver. And then I scored with like 2 minutes to go from Phil's corner. So just, and then that was the start of the season, and played 40 games that season, scored 10 goals, ended up in the playoff final, and we lost on penalties to get into the Premier League, and kind of all went from there.
Absolutely amazing. So you were literally going out the door and he stopped you stalkers.
Half stalkers.
Yeah. Well, they have a song about you at Norwich as well too. I Can't Take My Eyes Off You or something like that, don't they?
Yeah. Frankie Valli, is it?
Frankie Valli. Yeah.
They basically changed the I love you, baby, and if it's quite alright, that one. So basically changed the words instead of I love you, baby, it was I love you, Paul McVeigh.
Like
so
that, yeah.
Even now, like kind of 10 years later, they still sing it in the stadium, not because of me or because of what I did, but because the song's so catchy, you know? But obviously it's not complimentary in any way, because as the song kind of goes on, it's like, I love you, Paul McVeigh, despite your lack of height. We love you, Paul McVeigh. You know? And it just keeps going. You just keep repeating that, despite your lack of height, despite your lack of
Being very modest, Paul.
No. It's not all that fun when everybody keeps talking about that you're 4 foot nothing.
Yeah, Paul, you also played under Ian Holloway, didn't you? You must have a story about Ian.
Only had a wee brief spell with him. Holly was just the maddest person you've ever come across, but he was also amazing, because you must remember him as a player, unbelievable player, like just fantastic, never gave the ball away, great passer, and then he just had that down to earth nature and that West Country accent, and he just thought of things in a different way, because I think his child, one of his children, was either partially blind or partially deaf, or both, or I can't remember, but they had real severe learning difficulties, and he just thought about things outside of football, which most people didn't do. Most people were just thinking in a little bubble of football, and if you just think in the bubble of football, then that's why all footballers are sheep, because they just think the way everybody else thinks. And then suddenly Ollie comes in, does things differently, talks to people differently, treats them differently. And do you know him? Do you come across him before?
No, it's just obviously I love the stories about him, some of his quotes and things. As you say, he's just different to what the norm was, but comes across a funny boy. And good also. Like, he's done a great job at anywhere he's been.
Listen, and he's always been his promotion, and he does well, and it's because he can motivate a team and really rally them and galvanise them. And it's more just because he has almost it's probably like a little bit of an aura that whenever you're around him, he's so infectious. It's a bit like, it's almost like a kind of a mini version of Klopp. You know, like Klopp is so touchy-feely and tactile, and all his players just want to hug him. I personally would love a hug from Jurgen Klopp, because it's just like a good hug, you know, good solid man hug. But like Ollie had that, where he was so funny, so infectious, was always the one dancing in the change room. But I was only there for a couple of weeks at Plymouth whenever I got released from Norwich, and they offered me a 6-month contract, and just didn't really think it was worth it. And Luton offered me a 2-year contract when I left Norwich, so went with her. But that obviously turned out to be the worst decision ever, because we got deducted 40 points in the next 2 seasons, get relegated twice. So it wasn't the best move, I've got to say. But then we won a trophy at Wembley. You know, you won a JPT at Wembley, and we were getting relegated out of League 2, and we beat the champions of League 1, Scunthorpe, who were getting promoted to the Championship. So it was just like your head was all over the place. You didn't know when you were getting paid. 3 or 4 months without getting paid. We didn't have a training ground. Our manager gets sacked. Ken Blackwell, Mick Harford come in, sold our captain, sold our best player, you know, relegated twice. And it was just like chaos. There was actually a guy, because we didn't have our own training ground, we trained at a park, like a local park in Luton. And there was a guy who just used to walk his dog every day, waited until our trainings. We do laps of the park we were in. And then as we started training, he just walked his dog. It was a big, massive Alsatian right through the middle of our trainings. And I don't know how. He made it had a shit in the middle of the pitch every time. Like he just walked through, stopped, and a massive crap. And he just kept going through. And I'm like out there going, how do you even time that with a dog?
Fantastic.
But you couldn't say anything because it was in the middle of a park.
There you go.
Brilliant. And what happened after Luton then, Paul?
So I was lucky. I actually got back to Norwich City for one last year, because it was all about time. You know how them kind of stars align, that whenever I left Luton, Norwich had just got relegated for the first time out of the Championship into League 1 for the first time in like 50 years or something. And because I was potentially coming back, and I phoned up the manager, Brian Gunn, at the time, and said, listen, you know, by this stage it kind of, you know, talked about the playoff, you know, I kind of played over 200 odd games, nearly 300 games for Norwich. I'd been inducted into the Hall of Fame. I was top scorer, you know, played the playoff final, won promotion with them, played in the Premier League with them. And I came back, or I phoned him up and said, listen, you know, any chance of coming up back to Norwich, and he's like, I think you might have to go on trial. It's like,
Yeah.
You know, you're just like, you're devastated, you're thinking, oh, all right, okay. But anyway, it is what it is, and went on trial up in Scotland for a week, and fortunately they signed me. But funny, when they signed me, Gunny was having a conversation, he told me this after, they basically was having a conversation with the board to say, like, you know, think we should sign him because he's, you know, he's in good shape and he's playing well, and think he'd be a good acquisition for the team. And like, he's only 28, and they're like, what do you mean? He's like 32. Didn't know what age it was. So he thought he was going to give me a 1-year contract. I was in the prime, and it was actually in my last year before I retired the next year. But funny fella. And because I'd done my UEFA B course with him a couple of years earlier, so I knew him like he's my mate. You know, and he does all his little balance. He balances at 20 quid on his notes. The coolest thing you've ever seen. Every night out he always balances at 20 quid on his. And he's just so funny. I'm like coming back thinking, this guy's my manager now. I've been with him for years, but it's really weird. But after a couple of games, you know, we lost the first few games. He got sacked, and then Paul Lambert came in, and suddenly Paul Lambert came in, and it was just like, wow, this hurricane of, you know, force and winner. Just, this is it. This is what we're doing. Didn't really speak to you. Just scared the life out of you. And everybody just suddenly got on board, and we had a fantastic team. You know, we had like Wes Houlihan, Grant Holt, Russell Martin, Fraser Forster, just like some Chrissy Martin playing up front with Rooney at Derby at the minute. You know, we just had some really, really good players, and absolutely ran away with the league. Went on like a 30-game unbeaten run, and got to the end of the season, and I kind of won my second league title. And I just thought, 32, obviously Lambert thought, listen, you're kind of getting a bit old and slow. We don't need you in our team, because we were kind of going there and you're kind of going there. So he said, listen, you might as well go into the media, because you can talk for Ireland, but you can't play anymore. And I'm like, all right, okay, so that means you're not giving me a contract? That's how it works? He's like, yeah, that's how it works. Anyway, so that was it. And I decided to stop playing football, and then started going down this whole world of keynote speaking and kind of corporate training, and all around the mindset and psychology of performance.
Good. That leads me on to the next question.
Almost as if we planned this.
Tell us all about it, because you're speaking there about Ian Holloway having this sort of aura, and you know, did he look at philosophy himself, or was it just like natural?
I don't know. You know, it's probably didn't have enough time with him, the conversations that you could have had with him, but it's like, if you compare different managers that you go with, so like my first manager at Spurs was Ozzy Ardiles. So World Cup winner, probably one of the greatest players that's ever played football in England, obviously one of the best players on the planet ever if you're a World Cup winner. But he couldn't speak, really. You know, he's like, he didn't have the communication skills to get across his knowledge of how to understand and play the game to his players. So I'm sure you remember the little kind of pass, just pass. And we're all going, yeah, we kind of know we have to pass. But what else after the pass? But it never really went anywhere from there. It was just pass. So whenever you have that as your kind of starting point as a World Cup winner, it's your first manager. And then obviously, of course, he left, and then we had another guy come in called Christian Gross, who was this kind of avant-garde coach from Switzerland who, you know, turned up with his tube ticket thinking, this is really cool, I've got a tube ticket. I came to the press conference. Everyone's just going, that's just weird. I don't know why. And that was the start of it. But then he was doing things like bringing people in on a Sunday straight after the match, and then giving them Monday off. Everyone, like the players at the time, Teddy, Darren Anderton, Sol Campbell, losing the plot. What, I need a day off on a Sunday? And he's like, no, you need to come in and stretch and recover and revitalize, and then we'll give you Monday off. And they're like, no. So this is like 20 years ago, and that only now is how professional football is. You know, you don't get days off anymore. There's no days off. It's just like you're always doing something, and whatever that is, it's to do with the recovery or preparation. But he's doing it 20 years ago, so he didn't last long. And then Jerry Francis came in, obviously England captain, fantastic player for QPR, and he came in and again had a bit more of a kind of an old school attitude, but probably wasn't great at getting across his kind of method and methodology. All the way through to Paul Lambert, who it's almost like a lineage through the kind of coaching and managing royalty. So if you think about it, there's obviously only one Brian Clough, And Brian Clough under that team had Martin O'Neill. And of course, Martin O'Neill took everything that he ever does from Brian Clough, and how Martin O'Neill has been such a good manager and such a successful manager. And because of the way that he did it at Celtic and how he did it when he was at Norwich as well, because people were telling me, he would walk down the corridor. I'd be like, oh, Paul, how you doing? And he's like, how's the family? How's the dog? Brilliant. And next day walk past you, just like wouldn't bat an eyelid. So you were always second guessing with Martin. This is what I've heard. And then, of course, he's gone to Celtic, has amazing success at Celtic. Paul Lambert comes in, European Cup winner, Champions League winner, man marks Zidane out of the final for Borussia Dortmund, for Juventus. And then, obviously, Lambert becomes a manager. Because he played under Martin O'Neill for so many years, he's now got the exact same glasses, socks rolled up, things tucked in, collars up. He's just basically like another mini version. And then, of course, he turns up at Norwich, having had a good reputation at Wickham and Colchester. And it was just this, right, we're just winning, that's it. His team talk lasted about 4 seconds. That was it, just win the game, 2-11. Everyone's like, what? That's it. Yeah, just win the game.
Did he get involved in the coaching? Because I know Martin O'Neill removed himself from the coaching as well.
And that's why he did it. Because it's all about, when you talk, people need to listen. And if you're always that, just becomes white noise and people just stop listening to you. And you always have a little kind of, like in Mike Bassett, England manager, like the Dodgy, he was always a little right hand, like, yes, boss, okay, right, yeah, get the balls. What about Ramirez? Anything good we can say? That Ramirez is a hell of a player. 3 cheers for Ramirez. It's just like there's always someone who's acquired in the team or in the coaching staff.
That was like Phil Neal when Gordon Taylor was manager of England. Whatever he said, he just repeated.
Exactly. And the scary thing is, when I mentioned Giggsy was like the most decorated player in British history, who's next under Giggs was bloody Phil Neal for about 30 years. He won more European Cups and more league titles than anyone else. And it's frightening that you think someone with that much knowledge doesn't have the independence to be able to go, okay, right, that's your opinion, it's my opinion, let's talk about it, as opposed to whatever you say is right, and let's just go with that. It's just crazy.
Do you think that your football career has helped you in your new career?
Only in terms of, well, in some ways, no, because, even the fact that, so at the minute, for anyone who doesn't know, might be watching this, I pretty much go into businesses, whether it's in the UK or Ireland, around the world, America, Asia, whatever, and I just go in and generally speak at events or conferences where they, have all of their staff together and they want to try and get across different messages from the business, but they always have an external speaker. And so coming in from a footballing background gives you a little bit of a kind of credibility for whatever reason. I don't know why people give you credibility, because you keep a little leather thing around a green thing for a few years. It's strange why people give you credibility. And then being able to share some of the experiences that you have with these people in the business, because ultimately they want to improve the bottom line. Like anything, any business, they want to improve the bottom line, want more profit in the business. And to do that, most of the time, they need to influence behaviors positively. And if you want to influence behaviors, in my experience and in my world, the only way you can influence behaviors is through your psychology. So if you understand how humans function, and without going into a session here, lads, because I think I'll be here a long time, I think the simple way to describe psychology 1.0 is how you think drives how you feel. Your emotions will drive what you do every single day of your life, and what you do, how you behave, what your actions are. Of course, in my world, from a sporting background, my behaviors, my actions, my performance, how I perform every single day of my life gives my outcomes. So these could be outcomes that I am happy with in my life, or outcomes that I'm really not happy with. Whether you've got the money you want or not, whether you've got the body you want or not, whether you've got the relationship you want or not, doesn't matter, whatever outcomes you have. But most people don't realize that whatever is happening, your life is dictated in the largest possible way by how you think. But most people don't understand that. Most people are trying to change the behaviors, but haven't changed their mindset or thinking process. And it's a bit like if you want to give up smoking. And you might be able to stop smoking. The behaviors of stopping smoking might be, you've done that. But in your head, you're probably going 1 day without smoking, 2 days without smoking, 3 days. I've now gone a week. So you're still a smoker, whereas me as a non-smoker, I don't wake up in the morning going, I've gone 5 days without a smoke.
Yeah.
Because it's a different thought process. So again, it's just a really simple way of saying that as much as whenever the football side, I played in front of thousands and thousands of people, but I didn't speak in front of thousands of people. So to stand up and speak in front of 10 people was terrifying. Mm-hmm. Absolutely terrifying. And then, of course, being the kind of person I am, I started looking into it. Why are people so afraid of speaking in public? I didn't really understand this. I started Googling it 10 years ago when I started going down the street. And I came up with an article that people were more afraid of speaking in public than what they were of snakes and death. Which means people would rather hold a boa constrictor around their neck or die than speak in public.
Speak in public.
And I'm like, what? Why is that the case? But of course, it's not that they'd rather die. It's not what they're afraid of. The speaking in public is what it's referred to as social death. Nobody wants to stand up and embarrass themselves.
Yeah.
But when you do it for a living, when you've gone through 10 years of doing this, and my first gig was for Aviva. So I actually went off to America, paid a lot of money to go to a course in America and learn how to be a keynote speaker. Imagine like taking all your pre-seasons you've ever done and condensing them into 1 week. And it was the most horrible, uncomfortable week of my life because it was so far out of my comfort zone. But I came back and I kind of felt like I had all of the technique and tools that I needed to be a keynote speaker. I got my first gig for Aviva about 3 weeks later, really fortunate. And I remember doing this gig and just thinking, I'm so out of my comfort zone, so uncomfortable. I actually got it recorded. Guy came with me, recorded for me. And I watched it back about 6 or 8 months ago. I was awful. So bad. I mean, like stuttering, stumbling, not sure what my next line is because I hadn't learnt it fully because it was my first one. These little rosy red cheeks were so bright and I was so embarrassed. It was just like, oh. And then I see the testimonials. The guy who was my cameraman, the sports analyst at Norwich, had the wherewithal to get testimonials from people. And he was going around and getting, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I watched them back and they were like gushing. They were like, oh, I thought it was inspirational. I really loved it. Loved the way he said this line. I'm going, why could you
remember saying that?
How could you possibly think that? But it's funny because it takes 10 years to get from that, doing that first one where you can't be good at it because it's your first time. And 10 years later, like last week, I just delivered a keynote for Microsoft. And it's just a massive, massive journey of blood, sweat, and tears. But if you say, what have you learned from football? It's knowing that you're not an expert at the start and knowing that it just takes time, effort, hard work, ability to deal with all these setbacks. And then when I talked about that social death, it's because I have experienced it so many times. The amount of times I've stood up on stage and physically, metaphorically died on stage, walked off and just like, that was terrible. But then you regroup, then you learn from it, then you go back and you improve and you analyze it and you keep going, you try and get better and you see who's doing it well and you use all those skills from football that you've used over the last 20 years and 10 years later you're much better than when you started.
It actually sounds like my experience teaching. The first couple of times I think back to teaching, I am mortified. Yeah. And then I think to maybe now where, it's like yourself, it's much easier to do with all the years of experience. It's credit.
But that's all it is. That's it's funny. I read a book a long time ago and had a great little line in it about to say success is truly the result of good judgment, which, makes sense. And good judgment is often the result of experience, and experience is often the result of bad judgment. So like, you can't get there without it. No. You have to go through it. It's like if you've ever seen those little diagrams about what people think success looks like, and I'm just, I've just given you, 45 minutes or so of talking about a footballing career of 20 years of playing in the Premier League and didn't touch on the international stuff, but winning 2 league titles and playing in playoff finals and scoring against United and all that. And that's, what people might think that's like. And then they say, this is what success actually looks like. And rock bottom and then it's down here and then it's up and then eventually you get a bit higher and it's just the difference. And it's like whenever I start off any keynote, you kind of put up a little photograph of playing against Ronaldo, and it's just to give you a bit of credibility because they go, oh, I played against Ronaldo. And that's great. That's a good starting point. But at the end of the story, you kind of go, but no one ever paid any money for me. No one paid a penny for me ever in my career. And every single club I was ever at released me.
Shit.
So it's just the other side. It depends. It's just like, how you actually want to dress up the story.
It didn't sound as if you had an agent either, did you?
I kind of had one for a little bit, but I was not a big fan of them, so I kind of tried to stay away from them as much as possible, to be honest. So not my favorite people on the planet, but it's only because I know Jerry Carlisle, and it's like all agents are the same. They all talk too much and try and charge them a lot of money.
But that's amazing, even the way you framed that. If you think about how you've spoken about that, not many people are going to say that. They're going to say, I played with Klinsmann, I did that and did the other. And you've just turned that on its head.
But that's because you need to give the whole breadth of the story. And obviously you can't even do that because you only got a short period of time to do it. But it's like if there's any young kids watching and thinking about, what's it take to be a professional footballer? Well, it's a stupid question, because if you possibly think you can answer what it takes in a 20-year professional football career in one sentence, then you're going for the microwave, generation of just going, I want it now, I want it this. And you want to be able to look on social media and you want to see a 3-step or 4-step or 5-step method to do this. And you're going, well, no, it doesn't work like that.
There's no magic.
Every single day, doing it every single day to improve every day of your life. And whenever you realize that, and there's a keynote speaker in America who comes out with a great phrase, if you want something so much, if you want it more than you want to breathe, you will get it. Because it depends really on your motivation. Because I meet so many people. Gotta say, lads, I'm so fortunate. I've just moved home after 25 years, but I've had the most blessed, fortunate life ever. I've had amazing time playing football, and for the last 10 years, and I fly around the world getting paid to speak about playing football. So it's like my ma says, when am I going to get a real job? Has Jerry got one yet? If Jerry hasn't got a real job, then I'm not going to get one. But it's like at 42, I'm thinking, this is still so good. And I meet so many people who want some of this, or all of it, or a lot of it, or different things. And I just meet people who want things. And I'm like, that's great. But what are you prepared to do for it? Because whenever you put it into practice of what you actually physically need to do, that's a completely different ball game. And most people just fall away and fade away, which is why, because I'm joking and probably being a bit kind of, self-deprecating, saying about because you get a bit of credibility to play in the Premier League. But it's because to do that, take all of the kids around the world who want to be a Premier League footballer when they're kids. I did it from Belfast at 16. All I did was want to play football. Then I left at 16. Then all I wanted to do was be a Premier League footballer. So that was my focus, just how to be a Premier League footballer, international footballer. And I take all of the kids around the world and just keep trying to filter them out until you get even to 16 and they join a professional club. And then if you get to that, then you go, okay, can you get the professional contract? You might get a 1-year contract, but can you actually get in the first team? Can you get in the first team that plays in England? All these kids around the world don't even want to play in their countries. Where do they want to play? The Premier League. Because it's the most prestigious and richest league in the world. Until eventually you get to a point where you've done that and got to the tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the population, which is why I think it's the most competitive and ruthless industry on the planet.
Paul, I actually take my lads team at St Mary's here, right, back home. And I'm just listening to you, and what you could actually do for young players is phenomenal. Do you do that with children? Because that's something that the kids don't actually know. I mean, you were on there with Jim Magilton and Father Phil there not so long ago. I was listening to you, and he was on with ourselves. Him and Jared Little are doing an amazing programme there with the IFA. But the likes of you with your knowledge and able to take that to the children and maybe schools, I don't know, it just strikes me that it's something that kids could really benefit from. Have you thought about that, or do you do it? Or
So that's why I was a sports psychologist for 7 years. So whenever I stopped playing, I worked for 2 years as a sports psychologist with Norwich City. And the first year, we did okay. I was just learning how to go from playing 1 year to suddenly delivering sessions the next year. But it was because it was the youth team, so it was easier. But then the second year, 2012, we got actually all the way through to the final, and Norwich City. So in the last like 15 years, the only teams that have won the FA Youth Cup are Chelsea or Man City. And we played Chelsea in 2012 and we beat them home and away. So it was really, really amazing experience. Great achievement for the kids to go or the lads to go and win the FA Youth Cup down at Stamford Bridge in Carrow Road. And then after that season, I worked with a year with the Norwich first team. And then we left there and went to Crystal Palace for 5 seasons. So it kind of felt by 2017, I just finished my master's in sports psychology. And at that point, I kind of thought, have a really good understanding of what we call experiential learning, because you kind of, to do something to an elite level, just by doing it, you obviously pick up lessons and insights on the way. And other people who work at the elite level who don't do it, but they learn how to do it, almost come at the other end of the spectrum, which is like your sports scientists, your analysts, physios, your kind of all those kind of people, psychologists, people like that. But because I went off and did my master's in sports psychology, I just wanted that sort of, dichotomy of being able to understand elite performance from both ends of the spectrum, and no one else really has that. So again, because I'm not a household name in football, I have to create another way of having a USP. And so for me, I'm the only person who's ever played in the Premier League and has a master's in sports psychology. Now, for whatever that's worth, it just helps me get things across, because whenever I can explain it in a way that you've done it and you know how to understand the methodology, the theoretical principles and concepts and tenets behind it.
But you're a household name here.
That's only because you know my cousin. It's only because Noel.
Absolutely not.
I bet you knew Noel before you knew me.
Definitely not. We watched you on TV. All down the road.
Yeah, so it's funny. So the 7 years I had in the sports psychology world was just added on to the nearly 20 years already. So it was like 25 years in the world of professional football, an elite performance. And so I was really fortunate. I was at Crystal Palace for 5 seasons with Aaron Wan-Bissaka. So he'd come through the youth team and through the young pros with us before he got into the first team at Palace. And so you kind of, you've got all these different experience and people and stories and stuff. But then I just got to a point where 3 years ago, I love the speaking, as maybe you might be able to tell. But I love that. I love that experience of being able to get out and impact people and kind of share stuff. And it's not just in a 45-minute session. You then can take them through a 3-day program where you're physically giving them tools and techniques, and you can take them through a 12-month program, which gives them the ability to embed it and make it sustainable. And suddenly you're then making a real difference with people. And whenever you can start doing that, of course, if I kind of feel like without being, kind of big-headed, I kind of feel like I've got the t-shirt from the world of football. And now it's like, okay, so what about this whole world of corporates and, big business around the world? And then because just the way my brain works, I thought, I don't just want to do this around Ireland and England. I want to do this around the world. And the only reason I did that is because I asked myself this question quite a lot, is why not me? Yeah. Why can't I do it? Because there are other people who are doing it. There are other global keynote speakers like myself who are speaking in 40 or 50 countries a year for big businesses. I'm going, well, some of these guys, they don't have my background. So whenever I go in and stand up in front of Germany, if I'm in Germany speaking to BMW and I can share my experiences, I know what I can bring to the table. Or if I go to America to speak with Budweiser, or if I go to South Africa to speak to Investec, or I go to Australia to speak at Bank of Australia, whatever it is, it's like, I know now, after 10 years doing this and 20 years of football, you know what you offer, and you can offer, a whole range of different insights and experiences that people give a certain credibility to, just because you've got to this point of playing in the Premier League.
So that's really thoughts become things again, isn't it?
Well, for me, that's it sort of depends what side you want to discuss. If you want to discuss the funny stuff and the football stuff, we can talk about that. If you want to discuss how after 10 years of leaving football that I'm kind of speaking in countries all around the world, the only thing I would sort of throw out is that it doesn't happen by accident. It's not a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence whenever I was doing visualization as a 16, 17-year-old kid. And the one scenario that I was visualizing was getting the ball on the left-hand side, cutting in and curling in the far top corner. Because I used to visualize every single morning, every day before I went to the training with Spurs. And then because Chris Hughton was our manager at the time in the reserves, he would then take me out and physically make me practice it. So doing all of that for the first 5 or 6 years of my career, and after 20 years looking back, the majority of goals that I scored was getting the ball on the left-hand side, cutting in and curling in the far top corner. So again, I would say, is that a coincidence? It's hard to tell. I didn't really enjoy doing my masters. I wouldn't recommend it. But one thing you learn from it's kind of cause and effect. Why, if you do something, what impact that might have. And it's really hard to say because I did the visualization. That's why I scored the goals. Too hard to say. But same thing, 10 years ago, when I came out of professional football, I had my sights set on being a keynote speaker. And 10 years later, delivering it for Microsoft, I'm still not where I want to be, but I'm definitely on the path towards that. And again, because I've got this sort of ambition of wanting speaking in 50 countries within the next 2 years, it's just the way my brain works because I've always been so kind of focused on what I want to achieve in my life. But then I'm a bit weird, so don't be doing what I'm doing.
No, I think your visualization techniques are obviously working. I mean, we had vision boards years ago, and we had properties and things had gone well. Now they fell off the edge of the cliff. A bit like you getting asked to leave certain football clubs, but we have the mindset to get back again, as Ian Dowie said, bounce back ability.
Great word. Great word.
I think it's important. But actually, the guy who helps me, a friend of mine, Mark O'Hara, he's a psychologist, and we were in a cup final there at Seaview just at Christmas, after Christmas. And he had the kids visualizing, putting the ball in the top corner, thinking about how you feel when you're going to win. And we were sitting there, and lots of the kids were uncomfortable in the changing room with their eyes closed. And it works. And we won 1-0, beat Celtic boys. And, it was absolutely brilliant for the kids. And both of us actually, would place a lot of value in what you're doing. It's not
I'm just checking this room here to see if there's a mess in it. But over in that far corner, I've still got the vision boards. I'll not go too close to it. But I've been taking stuff off on that from 2007, and then just this year, I've been, one of the wee small ones this year is to read 100 books, and I'm in the middle of about 20, and I've done 16 so far. So I will. I'm running a wee bit behind. You'd have thought I'd have read more books under lockdown, but I've been doing other stuff hence this year. But again, I have stuff on that, simple things. It's not all material worth. But again, I'm a great believer in the vision board. I've had it, as I say, 15, 20 years.
And that's the thing is, I suppose all you're kind of doing is there's absolutely no guarantees with any of this stuff. This is probably it's almost like a little disclaimer should be coming along the bottom of the screen. There's no guarantees with any of this stuff. But I suppose what I'm doing is I'm trying to learn from the people around me as I'm going through my life. So whenever I'm reading books, speaking to people who I just think their lives, the way they have their lives, I would love to have some of that. And one of the guys who I work with, a guy called Gavin Drake, who runs the Mindspan business. And whenever I came out of football, Gavin was our sports psychologist at Norwich. And he said, listen, why don't you come and work with me? Because you clearly love the subject of psychology. I think you'd be interested in it. You might enjoy delivering the sessions as well. And as I started working with him, I could see how his psychology is allowing him to create the life that he wants. And most people that I come across, they just have this kind of, oh yeah, I'll be happy when, or I'll get around to that at some stage, or I might do this in the next kind of years, or whatever it is. And it's listen, there's no judgment, absolutely no. I've learned this a long time ago, not to be judging people in their lives, because I have no idea what people are going through. So all I know is, for me, if I put all my time and energy in investing into this, I'm going to say this, my mindset and my psychology, that if this is right and in a very healthy, constructive place, the rest of my life kind of falls into place. Because it dictates everything, not just for me, for everybody. And whether they know it or not, whether they utilize it or not, is a different matter. But it dictates everything. Your psychology will dictate what food you eat, what drinks you have, how many times you go to the gym, whether you're happy in your relationship, whether you're happy in your life, whether you're got a certain amount of financial, whatever it is, it's all dictated by this. And most people that I come across, if I ask most people, you got any goals or targets for work? Everyone's like, yeah. Oh, yeah, goals, loads of goals, targets for work. Okay, got any? Well thought out, well constructed, and this is generally the key difference between most people. Written down goals or targets for your personal life.
Yeah. No.
And again, it's not for me to judge this. It's just an observation. And you say, well, what do you think most people value more in their life? Their work life, that they're putting all this time, 40, 50, 60 hours a week into all this, that they've got these targets for, or their personal life, which probably most people would value way more than their work. Because most people work to live, they don't live to work.
That's right.
And again, it's not for me to say what they should or shouldn't be doing. I'm just saying, whatever you do, brilliant. This is the way I do it, and I'm doing it, and I'm very kind of happy with how things are going. So I'm just going to carry on trying to keep doing this and keep investing in this because it's always worked for me.
I think there was a study in Harvard about that. The people who had written down their goals were about like 1 million times more successful than the people who hadn't actually written down goals.
Yeah, I think this is the sort of general statistic is about 3% of the population.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, all it is, it's whether you write it down. You can do what I do. You can write it down, have it on little bits of cardboard paper. I used to have it on my wardrobe, so if anyone ever walked in my bedroom, they might think I'm a bit weird because I see my goals, but obviously there wasn't a lot of people walking into my bedroom, so I was okay. and also, I didn't care if they thought I was weird. So that's the other thing. It's like when you stop caring about what people think, that kind of takes you into a whole new level because you just don't really.
You're only saying that because your ma's listening, by the way.
I know, that's true. So it's just the funny way that kind of people go about, because all it is just my reality of the world is so different to everyone else's, which is why whenever I left Belfast at 16, my belief was about my reality of what I thought I could be a professional footballer, or after meeting here at Clinton, I would never do that. And now it's my belief of what I think I'm capable of rather than what I don't think I can do.
Fascinating, Paul. Absolutely fascinating. And just before we started, you'd said your father had a lot to do with that too. I mean, it's amazing how things pass on. Yeah,
it's just that, his, and he's still, wherever he is, kind of, sure he's looking down on us. It's not dead, like he's just really condescending, so it's just like just happens to be like this person. He's probably actually down at Balmoral Golf Club. He just has this kind of ability to kind of take the most mundane thing and make it enthusiastic, or make it funny, or make it optimistic, or whatever it is. And probably being around someone like that for a lot of my life was really, really influential. And you don't even realize you get influenced. And this is probably where people are at this stage in life, where you think, I kind of decided that outside of me, and I mean literally outside of me, I pretty much have no control over anything. Mm-hmm. Can't control Donald Trump, can't control politicians, or the weather, or the economy, or all of this stuff, right? So I just generally don't try and control anything like that. So the only thing that I can control is me. And when I say me, I mean this. Because if I can control this, I'll do whatever I do, which is why I'm just halfway through like a 12-week training program or whatever else you're doing. But the whole point is, you get other people in a way that you can try and either help them or nudge them down a certain path is much more about influence than controlling them. And if you have kids, and if you're still trying to control your kids, it's like you just beat your head against the wall because you can't control your kids. But as parents, you have the single greatest possibility to influence them. And if you haven't realized at this stage that you can only influence and you can't control them, you probably save yourself a lot of time and effort. If you have a wee look here, you'll see that that's what's happening to me, trying to control them. Yeah. I've got all Arctic blonde. Yeah. So, and this is the best thing. I'll leave you with this one because this is going back to my friend Gavin Drake, who was the sports psychologist who started Mindspan. Because of the way that he has his life and his kind of philosophy and methodology, his probably principal concept is around accountability or responsibility for everything. And it's not everything else in the world, it's just everything that he does. So the way that he brought up his kids, when he had 2 kids, they're in their mid-20s now, so lovely, lovely kids he has. But when they were about 10 and 12, he sat both of them down, him and his wife sat them both down and said, from this point on, I will never, ever tell you to do your homework. Now, at that split second, those two kids thought he was the coolest dad on the planet. He's like, what? Never have to do homework again? He said, I didn't say that. He said, I will never tell you, you have to do your homework.
Reverse psychology.
Well, it's actually giving him the psychology of accountability. And I said, so if you don't do your homework, what might happen? Might get in trouble with the teacher. Okay. And what might happen then? Oh, and then might have to go and see the principal. And what happens if you fail your exams and all? And you can sort of see the route he was going down. He goes, but I'm not going to tell you to do your homework, but what happens if you do your homework? Well, you might get your results. And then what happens if you get your grades? And then you might do this. And then what happens if you have these options? Then you can decide. Anyway, so that was the kind of decision he gave them at 10 and 12. And from that point on, probably took maybe a couple of weeks to get fully embedded. But after that, never told them again. And now both of them got their degrees. Both of them have got their degrees. Both of them in great jobs. Both of them doing well. Because at a really early age in life, he gave them possibly the greatest gift of they're responsible for their lives. And most people, in my opinion, don't take as much responsibility maybe as what they could, because generally a lot of people, and I'm not pointing fingers around here, but if blame were an Olympic sport, I think we'd be in the medals every few years.
Yeah, I would be a gold medal winner, I'll tell you that.
And listen, it's good to do it for a bit of crack, but when you're actually doing it and it's not a bit of crack and it's actually because you think the reason why you're in a certain situation because of that, or that, that's whenever there's just a challenge. And I'm like, well, this is where the accountability thing for me is just the best possible lesson.
I really like that. Paul, do you know why you think you're weird?
I think I'm weird, yeah.
There's three of us here, real weirdos. I can't wait to have a pay per you.
Fantastic.
Listen, before we let you go, we've got a regular thing about a four ball. Who, dead or alive, who to take, even to the pub after, or whatever?
Oh, God. So I told you about Gaza.
Yeah.
And even just like after we finished the shoot, and as I was kind of leaving, I was walking out of White Hart Lane and John McCurb was there, and Gaza had his little sports car out the front, and he basically was like, oh, Gaza, you're not going to give Paul a wee man a lift home? Gaza's like, yeah, come in. And if I tried to get in this sports car, it looked like, do you remember like in the Dukes of Hazzard?
Yeah, jump through the window.
Yeah, it was like the door was locked. I was like, oh, it's locked. He goes, yeah, no, the doors are locked. No, like Dukes of Hazzard. He goes, no, you have to get in through the window. So I like trying to climb in with my bag, like trying to get in through this. And he just pulled the button open, pulled the door open. Just sounded like an 11-year-old. That's the kind of person he was. But I think as much as I'd love him, I'd love to have just an hour sitting there and around listening to him. For some reason, Barack Obama fascinates me. Just love kind of the way he handles himself, and if there couldn't be any more polar opposites between him and Trump of what leader should be and what a current leader is. And then four ball, oh my God. I tell you what, I've got to say, Ryan and Magilton together.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that'd be good before, and then I just probably caddy for them.
Absolutely brilliant. That was first class, Paul. Honestly, really, really enjoyed that.
Where do you send the invoice to?
Jerry.
No, definitely.
Oh, I can blame.
Send it to Sterling to call him.
Paul, if someone wants to get in contact with you, how do they do it?
Yeah, the socials are probably the best. Whenever you go on like Twitter or Instagram, it's just Paul McVeigh 77, or actually the kind of the biggest network I have is on LinkedIn, because obviously all the stuff I do now is all business, so it's always different organizations or different companies. So LinkedIn is always a good way to get in touch. But yeah, very, very, very happy to connect with anyone who might be interested in getting involved.
Well, I'm telling you, that was seriously brilliant. I really enjoyed that. That felt like about 5 minutes, and it was about an hour and a half there.
An hour and a half.
An hour beforehand.
It might have been 5 minutes to you, it felt like about 5 hours to me.
You see what I've got to go through, Paul? Paul, thank you very much. Brilliant to have you on. And if we can help you in any shape or form, we'll give you a good plug and try and get some clients for you.
Good man. Appreciate it, boys. Thank you.
Good luck.
Cheers, Paul. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
So welcome to today's show. Today we are with football and commentating royalty. We've got John O'Neill, ex-Leicester City, and the one and only Joel Taggart. Welcome to the show, boys.
Glad to be here.
Hi, how you doing?
And Jerry, I've forgotten about you again.
You have. It wouldn't be a show without you forgetting to introduce me.
Can't help myself. So, John, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a wee bit about yourself and your background and maybe how you got across the water and who you played for here and stuff.
I didn't play Irish League football at all here. When sort of around that age where you were getting to Irish League, Derry City had gone out of the league. They'd been playing up at Coleraine for a while after the problems they had at Brandywell. But then that had all finished, so there was no sort of local football in the town. So from about 14, I was going over to Leicester on trial. I'd been playing for a local club, just local youth club, Derry Athletic Football Club, and their manager at the time was Leicester City's chief scout in Ireland. And sort of through that connection, he sent me over. Each time, like during the holidays, I would have come back over at Easter and then during the summer. And then around about 16, when they wanted me to sign as an apprentice at 16, I was doing the A-levels. And I said to them, look, I wanted to stay on at school and do the A-levels, and they had no problem with that. And again, for those 2 years, they were taking me back and forth on holidays. And then when I then passed my A-levels, they wanted to sign me as a pro, but again, the grades were good enough for me to go to university. So I went over and spoke to them, and we decided to choose either Loughborough or Leicester University. And as it turned out, Loughborough had the course I wanted to do. So for 3 years, I signed with them as a non-contract player, basically an amateur player. And then eventually, when I graduated in 70, I signed as a pro for them. I actually made my debut on my last year at university. I was actually playing as a non-contract for my final year at university, and was training maybe 3 or 4 times a week and going to a couple of lectures and then playing on a Saturday. So it worked out really well. Leicester was very good in that sense,
Brilliant. There's not too many footballers have done that, going to university and playing professionally at the same time.
I think there's more than you would know, might know, but I went to Loughborough purely and simply because it was the course I was doing. But it turned out to be a great university, and when I was there was a lot of great sporting university. Always had a reputation for that. Where I was there, I was doing economics with accountancy, and Seb Cole was on the same course. He was doing economics with politics. Surprisingly enough, he went sort of into politics. But all throughout it, throughout its history, they were for their sport and sort of proud. So it was a good university and enjoyed the time there.
I remember Johnny McGee, who played for the Blues, had gone to Loughborough as well, hadn't he?
I think he had, yeah. But if you Bob Wilson was there. There's a few sort of ex-footballers over there. There was a lot of athletes. Competed in the Olympics. So it was a good university, and as I say, Leicester were brilliant in that sense. In the first couple of years, you might only be training with them once or twice a week because you had to obviously do your lectures and whatnot, and then play on a Saturday. And I always just have to ring up on a Friday to find out what time the bus was leaving on a Saturday for an away game. It was good times, hard work. You had to, you had to do your training and fit in that with your education. The guy I was rooming with at Loughborough just so happened that we were on the same course, and I'd be away playing with Saturday, and come back on a Saturday night. Sometimes not get back to our schools until about 2 or 3 in the morning. He's in there studying like mad, there's absolutely no way I'm going to pass anything here. If this is the work that you had to do. By the end of the 3rd year, I was forgetting about the lectures and more or less going to the training because I'd had enough of education at that stage. Now all I wanted to do was play football.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And then did you sign a pro contract once you finished your degree?
Signed a contract there. That was my first contract in 79, and stayed with them until 87. Leicester were a good club.
Who was the manager then, John?
When I first signed, it was Jimmy Bloomfield. He was a good manager. He was London manager. Always had them sort of mid-table, sort of table. And the directors then thought that things weren't going well for them. They brought along Frank Klimpak, the ex-Arsenal, and Frank brought in a lot of old Arsenal players, who had maybe just gone past their sell-by date, and he had a disastrous first year and got relegated. And then we had Jock, Rangers manager. He come down. Jock was a character, absolute character. First year with him, we were in the second division, and won the second division championship, and went into the first division. And the build up to the kick off to the first division, he did an interview on local television, and they asked him, "How do you think we'll do?" And he says, "We're going to win the league." So that was Jack, great motivator. You went through it for him, on the coaching end of it. He was a little bit suspect, but he had this thing about it. He was a really good motivator.
We were talking to Paul McVeigh earlier, and Paul was talking about Martin O'Neill and Paul Lambert. They said they were sort of chips off the old block. They were much the same. That they were really good man motivators, but the coaching they left the other people.
Martin, absolutely agree with Martin. Martin was a brilliant motivator, but anybody would tell you, say there's Steve Wolf or probably John Robertson that were doing all the coaching behind the scenes. But as a captain, Martin was an inspirational captain as well. Martin was scared the life out of you. You basically had to toe the line with him, good mate of mine, but he didn't suffer fools lightly at all. And I wasn't surprised at all when he did well at the management. Funny enough now, when he went to Leicester first season, I think he struggled a little bit, and it was sort of talk they were trying to get rid of him, but they persevered. He really sort of put Leicester on the map at that stage as well.
I think he made a good school teacher.
I don't know about that.
Very stern. I remember him.
I'll tell you what. He's turned out to be, although he hasn't been used over the last sort of 2 or 3 tournaments, but I think he's a great commentator as well, particularly when he was on during the World Cup.
What did you do?
Do you remember he took Patrick Vieira and Fabio Cannavaro to task? He said, "Do you think those two think I haven't won the European Cup?" He said, "I've won 2. How many of you 2 won?" The two just looked at him. Brilliant. So, Joel, tell us a bit about yourself and your background and how you get into journalism and presenting.
I sort of fell into that. At school, we had a teacher who was introducing media studies, and this was way back when nobody had really heard of media studies. And I went to the boys' model, and there was always a proud football tradition, and always teams in cup finals. So for a lot of the practicals that the lads were doing for their GCSEs and their A-levels, they were doing maybe a practical of going to one of the cup finals and doing the match and doing like wee mini match of the day program, and then it was dual purpose because the lads playing in the games had the like a copy of the match, a VHS back in those days.
I remember those.
So everybody wanted to be. Somebody said they were going to be cameramen, and everybody was doing various different things. And somebody at some point said, "Well, we need somebody to commentate." And obviously, I was like really shy and backward and stuff, but. So there I was commentating on these matches, but it was funny as things went on because I remember commentating schools cup finals on Philip Moran, Danny Griffin, George McCartney, Michael Ingham. That's just off the top of my head. Your lads who then went on, and you were then commentating on them, playing for the senior international team. You're thinking back to the days when you were commentating on them, and Philip Moran at the time was at La Salle at the time, and everybody knew Philip Moran, and the news was out that he was going to Man United, and he was the main man. I always remember what was the Belfast final, the St Patrick's Day final. He was in our age group, and we were 2-0 up, and Philip wasn't in the game, and all of a sudden he turned up for 10 minutes, scored 2, took the penalties, and they won penalty shootout. And you just saw it. He was just head and shoulders above everything else. But that's basically, and then from there you started, work experience. At a week's work experience at UTV with Mark Robson, which I never forget, one of the best weeks ever. Then a week's work experience at the BBC, week in the Telegraph, and you start doing freelance stuff, on Saturdays, and basically that's what happened. And I went to university occasionally because I felt obliged to and had to. The days I was rocking up, you were going to go to lectures and you got a phone call from the BBC. Can you cover a CFAX shift? Remember those CFAX? Can you cover a CFAX shift? I'm going to go into a lecture, say I'll be down in 20 minutes down the road from Queens, because my calculation was that would be more valuable to me in terms of what I wanted to do than going to the lecture. And that was basically what happened. 99, then I got a full-time job and been there ever since, 21 years.
And did you actually study media studies? Because I asked Stephen Watson the same question and he said, no, history and politics.
Well, he's a lot older than I am, so and you can tell he's a lot older even just by looking at him. But no, I did media studies at GCSE and A level, but I did history and politics as well at university.
See, that's where we went wrong, John. We should have done media and politics.
These are to bluff your way through.
Brilliant. So tell me about you two then. How did you two meet? Was it commentating on the games?
I'll tell you how we met. When I first did it, I can't remember when it started. It must have been around about 1991. And at the time, Jackie Cummins was the guy that was doing all the commentary and whatnot. And as Joe will tell you, typical BBC, knew nothing about it. Turned up for a game one time, and there's two lads, and they looked to me like little schoolboys. I looked to see whether they were wearing short trousers. Just in the commentary position, and I thought, who's this? And then I'm not sure it was Brian Johnson. I don't know if Brian was producing at the time. It might have been Joe able to tell me. And he says, these are the new commentators. And I thought, right, and since that, it's been an absolute ball.
16th of August. I looked at the date, 16th of August 2000, and that was Northern Ireland, Yugoslavia. And the game, things that stick in your mind about matches, always remind anybody that was at the game. David Healy scored a goal in the first half. It was a great pass and a great run, great pass from Jeff Whitley. And David Healy arced this run, and I think it was his home debut. And he went and he scored a goal, and the Yugoslavia scored 2 in the second half. Remember the lad Jerry? He had a nightmare at Chelsea. Matija Kezman, but he scored PSV. He scored for Yugoslavia that night, but that was our first commentary game together, and then our first trip together it was like an introduction to what the next 20 years will hold for you. So, the first away game was in Malta, and we went to Malta with, honestly, I joked on her at the time. I always remember saying we went with more electrical equipment than you'd have found in Curry's. I was taking no chances and everything with me to try and get us on air. And it was back in the day when a producer and all went with you, Big Terry Smith, who was the head of sport at BBC at the time. Jackie Fullerton was there for the TV commentary. John and I were doing the radio. Ian Dowie was coming in to do the TV with Jackie. We didn't get on air the entire first half. Nobody heard a word from us. This telephone engineer spent the entire first half, these cables, trying to plug everything in. I'm sitting thinking, first away trip, no, we're not going to hear a single word of commentary. The entire first half, Jackie's having to double up doing the TV commentary and the radio commentary. He's moaning at Terry the entire first half. Terry's standing over him going to Jackie, just do it, just do it. The half time comes, the whole thing, Jackie's in, giving off to Terry, moaning and gurning. Eventually we get on air, and I always remember the late, great Adam Coates introduced us. The immortal introduction. Glad to say our radio commentary team have pulled themselves away from their sun loungers in Malta and have agreed to join us.
Always remember, Joe.
And David Healy scored a penalty in that game, but it's always remembered. Sammy McElroy was the manager, and Jimmy Harvey was his number 2. And we're doing the commentary, and Sammy loses the bat with the referee, goes absolutely nuts. And the next thing, the referee comes over and sends him off. So Sammy's like, he's gone bananas. He's sent off. It was an old style stadium, you know, there wasn't like a seat behind the dugout, it was a big bit of tarmac, so he's way away from the action up in the grandstand. So it was Derek McKinley, the late Derek McKinley, the kit man. It was either his 100th or his 150th international as kit man. And Terry Hayes was exactly, I think, 50 games behind him. And I just inadvertently said in the commentary to John, wouldn't it be hilarious if Jimmy Harvey is sent off? Derek would end up managing the team on his own. It's not out 5 minutes. Referee's over. Jimmy Harvey. So Derek stands up at this point and sends the subs to go and warm up. And then proceeds to substitute David Healy. And David Healy starting the pitch, and somebody tells him, "You're going off." David is me. Off you come. So Derek McKinley takes David Healy off, win the game 1-0. So Sammy is absolutely raging because the first game of the next campaign, he's suspended. Jimmy Harvey suspended. Big Alan McDonald ended up managing the team when it came to that game. It was in Albacete, Jerry, just up the road against Spain. So, Sammy's pacing up and down the corridor. He can't take it anymore. So he opens the door of the referee's room, and the referee and his assistants are sitting on a bottle of champagne and Jimmy Boyce. And Jimmy said, "Sammy, come on in. This is Fernando's last game on the international list." And Sammy takes the door up. F off, Boise. Walks away.
I remember Joel as well. Ian Dowie was working for the TV. Him and Jackie were doing it together. And although we had been out for a couple of days due to cover the training and whatnot, Ian only came out the day of the game. And he arrived late and he got to the hotel and we were about to leave for the ground. So he went and put his bag in his room and rushed down, got in the taxi with us, went to the game. Of course, after the game then, he met up with big Jerry Taggart. And the next thing he knows, he's come back into the hotel, picked up his bag and went straight to the airport. Didn't sleep in the room at all.
Oh, fantastic. And Joel, how many games do you know offhand that you've actually done together?
I was counting the thing last night. I've covered a Northern Ireland game in 43 different countries, and John has been with me in 40 of them. He used to prioritise a few weeks in Florida for August friendlies every now and again.
I missed a few belters, didn't I?
He missed the trip to Montenegro, which was the worst hotel I have ever stayed in. The aforementioned Derek McKinley got stuck on the lift with all the kit when he was trying to take it up to his room. And there was I always remember there was a great lad called Nigel Adderley who was working for 5 Live at the time. He was on that trip for 5 Live, and he had been with England, so we were staying in the capital. But there was a place called Budva. It was a beach resort where England had stayed when they had been there. So he decided that's where we're going for the day and the day of the match, just to get away from the hotel. Steve Lomas was with me on that trip. We went to the beach that day, came back again. When we got back, there was a fire engine outside the hotel. I thought the hotel was on fire. So that was a good one to miss. That was Oliver Norwood's debut. And well, there was Turkey as well. John missed a game in Turkey. Nicholl came with me on that one. And Jimmy, who John will tell you is one of the funniest people you could ever meet. Jimmy was coming out after us because he was involved in football at the time. Can't remember where he was coaching. So Jimmy came out, stayed a night in Istanbul, and then flew on to where the game was. So he knocked the door of my room about an hour before kickoff. He says, "You'll not believe it, you'll not believe it." And I says, "What's happened?" He says, "I went and bought a whole new shirt, got it ironed and everything." He says, "I hung it up in the room in Istanbul and forgot to leave it when I was going to the airport this morning."
One of the best trips, Joel, was the Azerbaijan trip. We went to Azerbaijan, and unbelievable place, because of the oil and the Caspian Sea and whatnot, you just couldn't buy anything in Azerbaijan. It's just mega bucks. So we're going to the stadium, and there's like a 3-lane motorway in and out to the stadium, and we're going there and trying to get there a couple of hours as you do before the game. And we've got to about 3 or 4 miles from the stadium, and we're stuck on the road going into the stadium, bumper to bumper from about 4 miles out. So we think, God, we're going to be late here. So the next thing we know, the driver crosses the central reservation. And we think, there's no shortcut here, And
It's the equivalent of driving up the West Link in the outside lane in the opposite direction.
So he's going against the traffic for 4 miles in the outside lane, and the oncoming traffic is coming at us and flashing lights and whatnot. And me and Joel's got the rosary beads out in the back. But fair enough, Gary, the cameraman, he starts filming it. Otherwise, you would not have believed it. Going, holy God, we're going to get killed here. So all the way straight into the ground in the outside lane, the oncoming traffic, and the driver hasn't said a thing. So he gets there, he pulls up outside the ground, and we're looking at one another, and he turned around and he said to Gary, traffic's murder. so Joel gives him a bar of dairy milk, and we get out of the taxi, and just as that, the taxi behind us is pulled in, and it's all the media guys, the likes of Darren Fulton and William Cherry and whatnot, and they've got out, and we're going, you're not going to believe what's just happened. And he says, oh, we believe it. He says, because we were in the taxi behind you. Don't Gary's thing.
It was an interesting.
I think Gary put it up on YouTube. I think it's still on YouTube.
Been like 3 times, and you see the change in the country over a period of years. Like the first time we went, Azerbaijan now, if it comes out of the draw, you're thinking brilliant, what a trip, because it's a brilliant place, brilliant city. One of the last times we went, they were setting up for the Grand Prix. It's a street Grand Prix, and it was like about 2 weeks after the game, and the whole setup was there, and it was fabulous. But the first time we went, they told you, do not leave the hotel, do not even contemplate going out of the hotel at night. Stay in your room after 11 o'clock at night. Don't even be going out around the hotel. We went to buy DVDs. We went out one day around this market with these DVDs, and we bought. It's like you got 11 DVDs for $20, and then we came back to watch them. And when you put them all in, this message come up: if you have paid for this DVD, contact the FBI on. Fire was the one that I bought and was really looking forward to watch, but I always bring like a tuck shop with me, the crisps and chocolate and all this stuff. It's mostly for the players and John. Anyway, I'm in the hotel in Azerbaijan. There's a lad called Roger Anderson who was a producer at the BBC, and I'm lying in bed. It's about 3 a.m, and the next thing I hear the bang in my door. Bearing in mind, we've all been told, don't leave your room, don't answer your door, don't go to the hotel. So you wake up and your initial thought is, did I really hear that, or was I dreaming? And then 30 seconds later, banging on the door again. So then we went up close to the door, bangs again. Said, Joel, is that you? It's Roger. Said, right, okay. Opened the door, let him in. Turned out Roger was diabetic and he needed chocolate. He was for some of the dairy milk. And I'm standing thinking to myself, right, here, Roger, take that with you. If he collapses here in front of me, I have no idea what I'm going to do with him. He's going to go to sea. But on the trips that we have had, like in the places we've been to, and the supporters as well, they go to the ends of the earth. And like that was at a time when they weren't travelling for results. Let's be honest.
They weren't even travelling for goals, Joel. They weren't even scoring goals.
With beer.
Joel, tell the story about the lads we met in Warsaw in the McDonald's.
We went in the McDonald's in Warsaw one night, and the lads were there, and we had gone in for probably ice cream, and we're in the queue, and there's half a dozen lads, and obviously they recognised John, asked him for autographs, and that's embarrassing, the autographs. And they always say, "Is that Liam Neeson?" And I say, "No, John O'Neill."
Hey, Joel, Joel, I have to interrupt you. I swear to God, I was sitting biding the time to say he looks like Liam Neeson.
No, hold on a minute. He's put you up to that. He has definitely put you up to that.
I swear to God, I was going to
take that for 1 minute.
Well, we're at McDonald's and the lads have got over the disappointment that it's John O'Neill and not Liam Neeson. we're in the queue at McDonald's and John says, they're chatting away and whatever, and John says, lads, I really admire all the travelling you do. How long is it taking you to get here? And the lad starts to say, yeah, we flew to Amsterdam and got a train through Holland and ended up in Germany and got a bus to somewhere else and another flight to here. And it's like trains, planes, automobiles for them to get there. And John's saying, incredible, like I really admire the lengths you go to and, to come to the games and you aren't really getting any results. The lad just deadpan, straight face, turns around and says to John, not at all. He says, honestly, these trips would be absolutely brilliant if it wasn't for the matches. Kind of the way it was, for years.
Class. So I want you to tell me about, was Laurie McManamy there when you were commentating in the games?
John, he would have been there for you, wouldn't he?
Tell us about Big Laurie. You're bound to have a story or two about him.
Not really, because Laurie was very standoffish. It was difficult to get close to him. The only time I ever met him actually was and had time to talk to him was. Do you remember the game in Serbia, Joel, which went out behind closed doors? And there's a story.
Oh no, that's the wrong Laurie. That's Sanchez.
Oh, sorry. Who?
McManamy. That was before me.
I never met him at all.
Did you not either, Joel?
No, I started when Sammy took over. So that was I'm not that old.
I remember him just standing there and saying like, "Away the lads," and I was ahead of it. He never said anything else.
I think at that time, sorry, Joel. At that time, I did 2 or 3 stunts for the TV more than the radio. And we weren't traveling to away games. At that particular time, it was only actually when Joel and Michael McVeigh started to do it that we actually went to the away games. So unless that's the only time you get to meet the managers at all, really, is at the away games, because when it's a home game, basically you just turn up to the game. At least I do. Anyway, I just turn up to the games and commentate on the games. And a lot of the times on the away games as well, I don't even bother going to the press conferences because there's press conferences. You've seen one, you've seen them all.
To be fair, John, when you were working on the TV, you managed to pull off a great feat and do 2 games at once, didn't you?
That's right. We were doing a game, and funny, that was Laurie Sanchez at the time. We were doing a game in Switzerland, and that was on television. For some reason, it was just a friendly, but for some reason, it wasn't done on the radio. So myself and Jackie went out to Switzerland to cover it. I think it was a 0-0 draw, if my memory serves me right. But anyway, get back into the hotel, and there's only myself and Jackie have travelled on that trip. And we're sitting having some date, And, what Jackie's like? He turns around, he said, John, he says, you must be exhausted tonight. I'm going, what are you, Jackie? It wasn't that hard. He says, no. He says, but you actually managed to commentate on 2 games in one. I'm going, sorry, Jackie, you've got me. What do you mean? He says, as far as I know, he says, that was your first game with me. He says, if I have nothing to do with it, it'll be your last. So, but I'm saying that, see, working with both Joel and Jackie, you have to be on your toes because, they'll just throw one into you. And the night that Joel
we bring John for his insight, Simba, because his insight really came to the fore whenever we went to Greece. And do you remember?
He's laughing already.
Greece was whenever. It actually sticks in my mind for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is it was the first time I remember when we brought like a massive away support. Party Central. They didn't care about results by this stage. There's loads of them. All the supporters are there. But it's the last game of the campaign, and Greece are trying to top the group. And if they can top the group, means it's Spain that go into a playoff. So Turned out to be Sammy's last game in charge, but we didn't know it at the time. But we lost 1-0. George McCartney gave away a penalty, was sent off. But fans are travelling in big numbers. But after the game, Greece have qualified. Party set, fireworks, everything going on. It was really intimidating, the match during the game. I remember Big Mike Taylor had a mobile phone battery thrown at him during the game, and he lifted it and showed it to the referee, and the referee was looking for time wasting. It was just, everything was stacked against you. Sammy McElroy get hit with a supporter threw a kebab at him, and he get hit with a kebab during the game. But after the match is over, I throw John the question. I say, John, another disappointing night. It's another defeat, but is it great to be here to see what it means to the Greece fans have qualified, the party? And John says, yeah, it is unbelievable. He says, but Joel, they are rubbish. He says, that's effectively a waste of a place at the European Championship finals, Greece going to those finals. Anyway, we all come back home. John goes into work. He was still had his business at the time, and there's a sweep for who's going to win the Euros. John goes in, out comes Greece. John, he's around everybody in the office trying to swap it, do anything to get rid of it. No. So he goes away to Florida for his holidays. Obviously in America, no word of the European Championships. This is like 2003, nearly 20 years ago. John still hasn't got the grips for social media. But anyway, he comes back into work. There's all this money on top of the desk in the office. He says, what's this? That's your winnings from the sweep. What do you mean? Waste of a place in the Euros.
That's a true story. But one of the other ones as well I was going to say was do you remember the game against Canada? We were due to play England at
Old Trafford.
The next game. So we had a friendly against Canada. This was Laurie Sanchez, a friendly against Canada in Belfast the month before. So we set the team up how we were going to play England against Canada, and it ended up that 10-man Canada beat us 1-0. It was the worst game I've ever seen in my life. It was awful. The only sort of bright spark was it was Steve Davis's debut, and it was outstanding. And even from the first game, you knew this guy's a player. This guy's going to make a difference. But the game was awful, and you've got to be careful when you're working with him, because the ball goes out for a corner, and he turns around and he said to me, "The ball's just gone out for a corner. Pass you over to our corner flag expert to describe the corner flag."
I said, this game's so bad. The only thing that there is for John to describe is the corner flag.
What can you do? So I says, well, Joel, it's not a big deal I can say. It's a plastic pole, maybe about 5 foot high, and it's got a red flag on top. And Joel said to me, he says, well, John, he says, that flag's green. Are you colourblind? And I says, well, I am. And I've always been colourblind, but it had never affected me while I was playing, because when we were playing again back in those days, green for a club team was considered an unlucky colour, and very, very few teams, in the sort of 70s and 80s, wore green. It was different at international level, but I'd never come across it at club level. But my second game was the qualifier. The second qualifying game for the qualifier for '82. We were playing Portugal at the Stadium of Light, and we were in the tunnel waiting to come out. We'd lined up in the tunnel first, and we were waiting for the Portuguese to come out to line up alongside us, and then both sides walk out on the pitch. So the door to the Portuguese dressing room opens, and out comes the team, and they walk up along the side. We're standing beside us, and I'm looking at our kit, and I'm looking at their kit, and I'm going, oh, geez, we're wearing the same colours. And I thought, I'm in trouble. And the only thing that saved me was that they were wearing all red, and we had wearing white socks and white shorts. And that was the only thing that got me through the game. And I said to Joe, I never told anybody that. I certainly would have told Billy Bingham, because Billy was such a professional, that he was says, right, you're not playing. You can't distinguish the colours. But thankfully, that was the only time it ever happened.
Absolutely brilliant. So, Joel, I want to hear about these trips to La Manga. They're actually legendary. Tell us a wee bit about those.
Can we not stick to a few more international trips?
We're coming back to those.
We first went to La Manga. Crowded lads that my first golf club was Cliftonville Golf Club, and a crowd of lads there who we all would have played with. And we first thought about doing a trip away somewhere. So the first trip we did was a bit of a recce for maybe 5 days in 2005, and we went out sort of a April, May time, and remember the lads going out, 8 of us from the golf club. We went out. I mean, we didn't know what they expect. We'd book golf every day and everything, and like everybody was wrecked. But it was a great trip, and it was a sighter for 3 or 4 of us that were on that trip to kind of appreciate this is here to stay. But I always remember in that first trip there were 2 lads who come back late one of the nights, and then the whole thing in the apartment. You know, there's all whole kick, you know, of hoo-ha, bit of a party, the music's on. The lads who are blitzed. We were on the quiet one. There's 4 of us in one apartment and 4 in the other. The 4 that were in the other one, we put them there deliberately together while the 4 of us went to bed, you know. But it was great, you know. They get up the following morning, this wee woman comes out onto her terrace. Hope she's not watching. And one of the lads, we always got John the baker. Not surprising, he was a baker. John the baker, he's out with a cigarette out in his wee terrace. Your wee woman comes out and says, "Absolute disgrace last night. Did you hear that noise? Absolutely awful." And John, quick as a flash, said, "You're absolutely right, love. You come to a resort like this, you just don't expect anything like that. We've complained as well." Just deflected the whole thing, you know. So we went out and immediately we loved the place, thought this was great, the weather. So the following year there had been a kind of somebody had started this idea of what 2006 the Ryder Cup was at the K Club. Why don't we go to the Ryder Cup? And we come back, particularly myself and a really good friend of mine, Gareth Morton, who's a big Glen man, and he lives in Dublin now, but he still comes with us to La Manga. And we had been talking, we said, listen, you could go down to that K Club, you could get absolutely drenched, you'll play a fortune. Why don't we go to La Manga for a week over and have that weekend in the middle of it and have a barbecue on the Ryder Cup Sunday and watch everybody else getting soaked? And sure enough, you know, the weather wasn't great, and we went to La Manga, and that was our first September trip, 06, and we've been going every September since. And then about 2010 maybe, John, 9-10, we added a June trip in, and originally it would have been the first 4, I think, were myself, John, Jackie Fullerton and Tommy Wright. They were the first 4 we went, and then it kind of grew. Jackie's brother Jimmy came one year, who's even funnier than Jimmy or than Jackie. He's brilliant. And then Liam Beck came, and then John's brother-in-law Hugh came in, and then a lot of the lads that went in September decided, well, we want to go to both. So there's now a June trip and a September trip. The June trip is the La Manga Masters. John picked up a green jacket when he was away in Florida one year, the La Manga crest and all on it, so we'll have the La Manga Masters green jacket. And like everything else with coronavirus, there's been a delay to this year's La Manga Masters, but it will be staged hopefully in September instead of June. And that's been it. So every year, and then other trips have kind of sneaked in, and as Jerry knows, I'm out as often as possible now, and love the place, and I'm an ambassador for La Manga Club now, and hopefully everything works out over there and everybody's safe, and Jerry's been keeping us up to date with how tough it's been, and hopefully, obviously, we all hope everybody can get things back up and running again, and Jerry gets the bars going and back in the car hard. Jerry has had our party bus for long, ready for us when we arrived out. Best car.
I remember one time. So they take the 9-seater, and you know CC, the guy who works in the company. The boys dropped it off, got all their clubs out, and CC was in the car. I dropped them off, and he came running up to me in his broken English, Lithuanian he is, and he says, quick, they've left their golf clubs still in the bus. And I was like, they haven't, I've just seen them all take them all out. He says, no, you know, the weight of the bus was right down. And I went, they haven't. See, when you opened it, there must have been about 300 gin bottles all fell out the back of it. Still went down.
That was Well, that's what happens when you bring Albert Kirk.
Bring Albert. Absolutely fantastic. Joe, we have to mention who's the winners of the Masters, because you don't take golf that serious, I believe.
No. John is a former winner.
Yeah.
I'm a former winner. There are only three of us, myself, John, and Sammy Clingan.
No, Albert.
Albert Kirk, sorry, last year. Oops, sorry, Albert.
Yeah. You're in trouble. You are in trouble.
You would be in trouble if you forgot Albert, yeah.
We had to get the jacket enlarged. No, I'm only joking.
You're a bug.
It's one size fits all.
We'll have to keep going over until Liam Beckett wins the jacket, basically. And so we could be going forever.
Be a wee way late.
Liam always tells a story of, I don't know if he still does it after he's had the knee operation, but even out there in the Manga, Liam would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, sometimes earlier, and go for his run. And he's out on the run, and he meets Albert coming home. I don't know if he's told you the story, but Albert's banging on the door as Liam comes past. And he goes, Liam, he says, they're not lazy. He says, they won't get up and let me in. He's just come in from the night before. And Liam goes, I'm not surprised, Albert. He says, that's not our house.
Albert was 2 doors down. Some of the best track and some of the best sing songs, and listen, been some great stories over the years out there, and unbelievable. And we usually end up out at the same time as the Footballers Classic in June, so you see a lot of the ex-players and stuff out. And
yeah, that's the time Sammy Nelson asked me, was Joel my son?
You got married out there, Joel, didn't you?
Yes, 2 years ago. And we're out. That story, actually. I had never met Sammy Nelson before, but John had always told me the great stories about him and how funny he was. So we've been out one night. We ended up back. It was the last drop, wasn't it?
Drop, yeah.
And we were around the last drop, the wee bar facing the petrol station. And John's chatting away to Sammy Nelson. And I came in and I was standing beside John. And before this had all happened, we'd been round in the piano bar, and like they're playing a fortune for the resident pianist and singer, and whoever it was at the time, he's in giving it Dixie. The next thing, we're starting talking, but all of a sudden, however this happened, the music stops, and then we look up, and the resident singer has ended up playing for Albert, who has the microphone. So Albert Kirk has the microphone in the hotel piano bar, and this guy has been relegated to accompanying Albert, who's been through the full Eagles box set, and they can't get him off. So John, this woman comes up, we're starting killing ourselves laughing. This woman comes up and says to John, "Is that your dad?" After about 3 songs, we have said, "Come on, we're way out somewhere else." So we went around to the last drop. He's chatting to Sammy Nelson. I went in, and John says, "Oh, Joe, have you met Sammy? This is Sammy." And Sammy says to John, "Is that your son?" So Albert pipes up at this point, and he says, "Ha, ha, ha, he thought you were his son." I said, "What are you laughing at, Granda?" So this all goes on. We'll talk about this for years. So John gets up to read a poem at our wedding in La Finca, and he says, makes a lovely wee speech about one time I was out here at the Manga. I was asked if Joel was my son, and I couldn't have been prouder if he had been, and he made everybody cry at the wedding and the whole sort of thing, right? So everybody.
Remember, Jerry?
I do, yeah.
2 days later, we go back to the restaurant where the wedding was. And the guys are there, and there's a guy, Speedy, who's one of the waiters in La Finca. So they're all over, it was great crack, great day, it was really great. And Speedy says to me, "And that speech by your father, so emotional." So, more oil of Ule required for John there.
Right.
Big Liam Nation. Liam, can you sing?
No.
Well, you're a Derry man, you're bound to be able to sing.
No, I can't sing. That's one thing I can't do.
Yeah,
I'll tell you a funny story, though. Sorry, Jerry.
Sorry, do you remember the one that Liam was saying about the water polo game? and they were saying, you stupid finger this, you stupid orange this. And the girls from Ballymoney says, that's terrible, would you call each other and stuff? He says, well, did you not know we get a grant for this? We got £8,000 to come over here and try and solve our differences. And they were getting putting all their bags on at the airport, and to see the wee woman from Ballymoney or wherever it was, and she came over and she says, what was the name of that grant again? We're going to try and get it us girls.
They were all from Antrim, and they were all
Antrim, was it?
And they were asking. We said, we only bring him because we get a grant, and to get the numbers up. Grant sats, the cross community holiday grant form. So now you can't put it towards your flights, but you can put it towards your accommodation. In what way does it need to fall? And we started making all these, you need 55% minimum, And she started to all her ways. She went to such and such. I think we might qualify for that. How do you know if you qualify? And we said, well, if you go into your local post office, I said, Cliftonville Golf Club, North Belfast, and struggled over the years. I said, but Antrim, you might qualify. I said, all you do is you go into your local post office and you ask for the cross community holiday grant form. And if your area qualifies, they'll have that form and they'll give it to you. And we let them come into the airport, and the last thing they said to Aldergrove, what's the name of that form? And a mate of mine, Raymond Smith, says, hang on a minute, love, I'll write it down for you. And he wrote a bit of paper and handed it to her, and she was away to the post office.
Joel, do you remember the trip to Serbia? You could tell the story about the anthems, but do you remember the night we were sitting with Mark Robson, and I think Kate Hoey was there at the time as well? We're just sitting chatting, and for some reason, and I don't know why, it came round to the television license, and Mark Robson turns around and says to me, he said, I bet you there weren't too many that had television license where you came from. And I said to Mark, I said, I'll tell you what, I said, the height of the troubles, I said, if you think the detector vans were going to come into the Craigin to try and check who had a TV license, I says, you were be lucky to get anywhere near it. I says, but I'll tell you a funny story. When the satellite television came out at the start, I says, the people up around Norway, I says, they didn't bother with the dish. I says, do you remember the old metal dustbins with the dustbin lids? I says, up Barway, I says, they just used the dustbin lid for the satellite dish. He goes, is that right? He says, what was the reception like? I said, it was bloody rubbish. He was going to kill us.
That Serbia trip. We had gone previously to Cyprus on a string of there were some games that were pretty dismal. Friendlies over the years, and it's funny how this kind of fits in. I mean, later Michael had a game in Cyprus when he took charge. Really can't remember how far into his reign it was, but it was a 0-0 draw in Cyprus. And again, like, people think you're going away, and some of the things you come up against, even from a work point of view, like, we arrived at the ground, walked in, this guy said, oh no, I'm sorry, BBC hasn't booked a place. Said, no, we have, have the paperwork on it. No, I haven't booked a comedy position. And I said, well, as far as I know, we have. No, you have to pay. I said, well, like, how much? He basically said, how much have you got? Right? So I went, whatever euros, 100 and whatever euros. Yeah, that's fine. This guy, like, on the tape, like, cash in hand, eventually lets you in to commentate in the game. So it was freaky to get into the match, and like, I would say there were less than 100 people at the game, and it was a 0-0 draw, and it was a shocking game. But to put it into context, there was a game in Serbia when Nicholl was in charge, and it was played behind closed doors. There were more people at the game that was played behind closed doors in Serbia than there were at the game that was played into in Cyprus. Do you remember, Jerry, do you remember there'd been a massive riot between the Serbians and the Italians? I think it was in somewhere like Genoa or somewhere, in a qualifying match. There'd been firecrackers and everything for each other. So they banned the Serbians from playing in front of a home crowd for a number of games. Sure enough, what's their next game? Northern Ireland, So I think 240 Northern Ireland fans had been able to prove that they had booked their travel before the ban. So UEFA relented and said, right, those 240, you can go to the game. But there were no home supporters allegedly allowed in. Turned out like the media section of the ground was full of media from Serbia. But they were worried that the Serbian ultras would try to storm the stadium and get into the ground. So we're all told you have to be there 4 hours before kickoff. But 4 hours before kickoff, full airport security, full metal detectors, open everything, check all the bags. Eventually we get into the ground. So we're sitting about, you've 4 hours to fill, so we're chatting away, whatever. But some people maybe don't know, before every international and most major games now, all the the stuff about the mascots walking out and all that, there's a full dress rehearsal. So they do a full rehearsal of all the flags coming out, the mascots coming out, where they all line up, how they all cross over, how they all come off again, whole shooting match. But it includes the anthems. So we're sitting on the ground, so bored that we're watching the dress rehearsal. So the rehearsal starts, kids all come out, ball boys are all where they're meant to be, the big flags are out, big circle, UEFA flag or FIFA flag, whatever it was, middle of the pitch. Next thing the anthems start. They play the Republic's anthem, right? I look at him and he looks at me, he says, "Oh, don't tell them, it'll be hilarious." What are you trying to start here? And all I could think of was the phone calls I got today from the Nolan show and from Talkback saying, no, I'm telling them, not at all. So
we thought that the game behind closed doors would have had to be abandoned.
First ever game behind closed doors abandoned for crowd trouble, We went up to the guy with his wee laptop who's playing the anthems in, and I said, I think there may be a problem. He said, oh, no problem. I said, no. I said, Ireland, there are 2 football teams and you are playing the anthem for the other team. He said, is this a big problem? When you come to Belfast, if we were to play the anthem for Montenegro, I said, oh, big problem.
Big problem.
He's into his laptop trying to find the anthem. But
there's not a good story from Warsaw, Joe. Every now and again, I like to throw a little bit in to keep Joe on his toes. So we got out there, and Albert was out with Logan. No, he wasn't out with Logan. He was with Claire McCollum, working for UTV. So we're sitting in the restaurant the night before the game, and she said she had interviewed. Who was it she interviewed, Joe?
Colin Murdoch.
Colin Murdoch, yeah. And she said, I'd heard something today from a footballer. She said, I never thought I'd ever hear. She says, we were talking about something and asked him a question, and he came out with the phrase, since the demise of communism. And I'm going, that's a very good phrase, Claire. I says, Joe will get it into the commentary tomorrow night. She says, do you think so? I says, I'm sure he will. And then she went on to say then, we were talking about, like, what did she do? And Joe was saying, what did she do? And she says something like, of an evening.
Aye, that's right. She says, where are you from? And you say, I'm in Derry. She says, is there much to do in Derry of an evening?
Yeah. She says, of an evening. So I said to her, Joe will get in that in the commentary tomorrow night as well. And he's looking at me. So anyway, Joe, you pick up the story.
We go to do the game, and UTV, they don't have rights or whatever, so they were out to do all the stuff before the game and afterwards, but during the match, they're just sitting in the press area watching the match. So we're sitting all in a row. Claire's sitting to my left, and I have all the gear plugged in. The main socket was just beside her. And then I'm sitting beside her, and John's sitting to my right. So they're all winding up and all about, you're going to have to squeeze this in, going to have to squeeze this in. They think it's coming, way into the commentary. So, start of the game, hands over, let's cross our commentary team in Warsaw. John O'Neill and Joel Tyre says, yes, thanks very much, Adam. Great to be here. Northern Ireland back in Warsaw for the first time since, it was the 80s sometime, because John had played in the game. I said, back since first time, such and such a year. I made a wee joke about, Northern Ireland kept a clean sheet that night, trying to throw him off the scent. I said, remarkable in itself, given that John was in the team. I said, but John, to be serious, back in Warsaw, for the first time since the demise of communism, and I'm sure you've noticed, much more to do of an evening. Well, he's corpsed, he's gone, he can't answer. And the only thing that saves him is so far gone that she's laughing so much she falls off her seat and kicks the plug out of the wall, takes us off the air. The line is just gone totally dead. He's absolutely gone. I'll have to wait for him to get himself back sorted out again before we can dial back up again.
Totally took me by surprise. I knew he had got it in, but I never thought he was going to get it at the top.
Get it that early.
Here, I can't wait to see the trailer for this. Around the Vein, Fall of Communism, Claire McCallum.
It's like Talkback.
Joe, you can't come on without telling anyone you're famous for your sweets and your chocolate. Joel, famous like throughout Irish League grounds. You were going to do the exercise program with me and Colin just started, but you can't give up the sugar and the sweets.
No, can't.
Enlighten our listeners to where it came from and how it came from, and
it's probably all my dad's fault because he was a wholesale confectioner. he had a wholesalers, so that's probably where it all started. But no, I have the worst dad of anybody that John probably knows or any of you know. So I live on sweets, crisps, chocolate, Coca-Cola, burgers, chippies, you name it.
We went to the Ukraine and he didn't eat anything for a week. Other than sweets.
But that was actually so bad. That was Ukraine like nearly 20 years ago. Yeah. We were in Donetsk and it was so bad. There were only 3 hotels. Our senior team in 21s and media were all in one. Ukraine were in another and the match officials were in another. And it was so bad. Remember David Healy and George McCartney and Aaron Hughes and Danny Griffin probably at the time. All those lads were in the squad. Even for them, the food, I had to leave my key card behind reception and they were going up and raiding my room of the crisps. I brought all the Tato with me. In the room at night and everything was left. All that was left was the flavours that they didn't like. But that's been a tradition that has gone on. And the tuck shop goes on every trip. And it's open for all the lads in the press pack and the media. And it has to be said at the minute, the players. So there are a lot of the players who, on the charter flights, edge their way down to our seats. And the reason is to see what's in the tuck
rubbish.
So the number 1 suspects are Josh McGuinness, Stuart Dallas, Niall McGinn. There's a few others, so just we'll spare their blushes at the minute. Steve Davis is one. But that's the history of the tuck shop, and it's gone absolutely all over the world. Taxi drivers in Azerbaijan have had dairy milks. The bodyguard to the president of Armenia had a chupa-chup lolly during a match to try and keep them sweet. Honestly, they have been far and wide.
What did you give the UEFA media guy, Joe?
Can we tell that story?
Yeah.
Over in Romania during the qualifying campaign for the Euro, and there's a media delegate, and some of them are sticklers, others you can work with, So the guy came out. UTV had the rights at the time for the highlights, so they were entitled to a 1-to-1 interview. Now the IFA always play ball with everybody, and they give us all a 1-to-1. But this guy was saying, I don't care what your national association says. It's only for the rights holders who were Sky and whoever had the highlights, which was UTV. But UTV hadn't sent anybody to the game. So we were saying to him, come on, UTV aren't here. No, not true. I said, where are you from anyway? He says, I'm from Austria. So I'm trying to smooth him over. I said, John played in the game. Was at 82. Was in the squad. We played Austria in 82. So I got him talking a wee bit about the football. And then said, is this all you do, or what else do you do? It turned out he was an agent in the golden era of athletics for athletics meetings. So like all those golden league meetings, whenever Colin Jackson and Tony Jarrett and Limford Christie, he was an agent for setting up a lot of those events. So he had a really interesting history. So we're chatting away to him about that. And I said to him, can I remember the man's name? I said, listen, what about if I take the BBC microphone head cover off this microphone and you go for a walk, come back in 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll make sure that the interview's over and the microphone cover doesn't say BBC. He just shakes his head, puts his hand over. So he walks away up the tunnel. We go over, do the interview with Michael, one with Stephen Davis, come back. We're finished off, but fair play to him. He came out, and whenever we were finished, he comes to the end of the tunnel, and he looks at it, he says, is it safe to come out? And then you open up the thing and say, oh, there's the chocolate, and he's in for the dairy milks, never. And then the next night was the night of the game, and he was straight over, have you any more chocolates? So that bookshop has opened so many doors and got us so many places where we couldn't be.
Where was it when we were at the game and they wanted to do a live onto the show on the Saturday afternoon? And you know the way they only give you the 15 minutes at the gate at the training, and then they throw you out. And we were hiding underneath the desk in the live show.
You're only, you're explaining to people back here that you only have a certain window, and it's just they don't comprehend it. Even people who are working on programs so there's a news program or something they wanted to hear from us at training. I'm saying right, but I said we have a 15-minute window that we're allowed to see training, and then after that you're thrown out. There's only 15 minutes of training's open, so still haven't thrown to us. We're up in the gods, our radio position. The microphone's out. I'm down underneath the desk hiding. So in case Nicholl sees me, in the training, it's a colour out of him. Won't give me the team or something, for the match. Under the desk hiding, doing the insert of the programme, then back up again, trying to put all the gear away, disappear before anybody notices. It is a pantomime, from doing the game, but it's brilliant. You wouldn't change it, and the places that we've got to go, the people we've got to meet, the friendships.
Moscow was brilliant. We went to Moscow, and we thought, well, you go to Moscow, you got to go and see Red Square. So we get to Red Square, and there's scaffolding everywhere in front of the Kremlin and everything. We're going, oh, for God's sake, one time you're in Moscow, and the place has been done up. But what we actually didn't realise, it was the Moscow military tattoo, and it was in 2012, the 200th anniversary of Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. So we go and get tickets. What a night, one of the best nights we ever had. So we said to Joe, maybe we could sneak back here on Friday night. And he said, no, I think we better go to the game. That was a great trip.
And again, it's this thing about, people always say no matter where you go, you'll see somebody from home. And we were coming out of the Moscow International Tattoo. One of that all these military bands from all over the world, and Korea and Japan and Germany, Poland, put on this show, fireworks at the end of the night, cannon in the wall of the Kremlin for the 1812 Overture. But in the midst of it all, they'd had a pipe band. So it's a bit strange seeing a pipe band in Moscow. We're walking out, and all the locals were taken by the guys who had the kilts and all on, the hats. So there's this boy posing for photographs, and he's giving it the whole thing. And the next thing he starts to talk, and John says to me, I think that guy has a Northern Ireland accent. I said, no, sort of stop and listen. Sure enough, the boy turned out the pipe major of the band was from Belfast. And he's there posing with all the photographs. And went over and said to him, that's a familiar accent. He says, oh, what are you over for? So we're over for the match. And his mate rolls his eyes and says, yeah, don't talk to me. He says, we're meant to be performing here tomorrow night. He's only the pipe major of the band. He's going to the match.
Classic.
But Michael changed everything, lads, because, we had done so many games, and we loved Sammy. I still love Sammy, and he came over for Harry Gregg's funeral, and I picked him up at the airport and had a great chat up and down the road and talking about the old times, and it just didn't work for Sammy. But Michael changed everything, because I was always envious of, in a nice way, of Jackie and all those who'd been able to get the 2 World Cups and worked at a major finals where Northern Ireland had played. And I'm looking at all these games thinking, that's never, ever going to happen for me. I'm never going to get the major finals and work on Northern Ireland at a tournament. But Michael it just changed everything. His professionalism, how he dealt with players, how he approached players, bringing the likes of Aaron Hughes back out of retirement. Just everything he did, it just all fell into place. And you know, he got Lafferty going when it mattered for that one campaign. Got a goal. He had a settled back four. He built his team around a shape that you kind of knew if everybody was available what the team was going to be. He very much reverted back to that principle of, well, I want to get my strong best 11 players on the pitch, as opposed to, you know, all sorts of things that we'd seen in the past, and 4 centre halves across the back four and all sorts. And it was a roller coaster ride the whole way to France, John, through that campaign, wasn't it?
Oh, it was, you know, as you said, Joel, you thought you were never going to get there to work, and I thought I could never see Northern Ireland qualifying for another major tournament again. And just the right man at the right time. And his man management was incredible, absolutely incredible. And you could sense it, Joel. You know, even his first campaign wasn't great, you know. Just feel that the players now started to want to play for him, whereas before, you know, I mean, like I remember we were going to a game in Belfast and they were playing Spain, and the number of crowds was incredible, you know. And I could not understand how you didn't want to go and play against Spain, to play against the likes of Raul, you know, and he has to jab him out. How do you not want to play against those people? And Sammy would have been telling you at the time, like, he sat there on a Sunday night waiting for the phone to ring and didn't know who was going to cry off. And talking to him in the hotels, I remember the hotel we went to in Armenia, and we were saying, you know, during our era, when we were playing, we turned up injured. We didn't let on we were injured, because you thought, if you don't turn up and don't get in the side, you may not get back in again. And then it all changed for whatever way Michael approached it. I thought his man management was excellent. He had a team then that wanted to play for him. And
the first game of the campaign, it was a great trip, but it was one of the first times that the two things merged for us.
Yeah.
Because you always went away, and it was a great trip, but it was never a great result and a great trip. Bratislava had been one of our best trips away under Nigel Worthington, and it was fantastic, and there was a great group of people went. Lad Ian Dennis, who works on Radio 5 Live, was the regular on the beat with us for years, and then a lad Darren Fletcher, who now works for BT Sport when he was at 5 Live. They were great company, brilliant lads. Jackie would have been around, you know, and the nights out were great. Logie would have been there for UTV. One of the nights out in Bratislava, I remember we went out, and Albert, who was a star guest on your podcast a number of weeks ago, I'm sure people will never forget him. But Albert the magician, we'd gone to a nightclub after the match. But Albert had discovered there was a Cuban bar in Budapest, and he wanted to go to this Cuban bar. So John and Logie were going back to the hotel, said, not a chance. Albert didn't know where he was. And I said, I'm not a drinker. I said to Albert, right, Albert, I'll go with you, make sure you get back, but we're staying for 1 hour max, and that's it. Albert, I love you. Like, he's gone at this point. So over to the Cuban bar we go. Nothing would do, but Albert has to do his magic tricks. So Jerry made reference to it the other week. People go to Via Romano. Anybody that's watching this in Spain, go to Via Romano, the Italian restaurant down in Los Bolones. You will see 3 or 4 cards on the ceiling, or the owners club up at La Manga Club, cards on the ceiling. That is the calling card. Albert has been here, you know. So he gets the cards out in this Cuban bar, gassed, and he over to this unsuspecting couple, you know, sign your name on the card. So what happens with this trick is you sign your name on a card, put it back in the deck, and he's brilliant at the magic tricks, Albert. And he shuffles the cards about, but whatever way he does it, he throws the cards at the ceiling, and your card sticks to the ceiling. It's brilliant. So does the whole. And I'm looking at the ceiling, thinking, not sure about this here, Albert. Albert, the first throw, he misses the ceiling. That's the stage we're at this point. So they're all kind of, you know, laughing at Albert, and I'm giving it the old, it's all just part of the act, you know. So everybody's down picking the cards up again. Albert tries it again, misses the ceiling. So they're all losing interest at this point. They're all, rubbish. Blah, blah. While they're all down helping him to pick the cards up, Albert finds the card with a signature on it, and he walks over to the wall. And there's a picture frame on the wall in the bar, and he sticks the card in the middle of the picture frame, and he taps them on the shoulder and turns around. They all go, "Oh my goodness, that's unbelievable!" And all on the bar. Albert leans over to me. He says, "And I'm the one that's meant to be pissed."
Joe, tell the boys a story.
That was a great trip without a result, but Budapest was a great trip with a result. And John always said about Michael, when it came to substitutions, far more often than not, he got it right. And that game in Budapest, the weather was the same. It reminded us so much of Bratislava. There'd been a fashion show and all in the city centre. It was brilliant trip. Fashion show. We nearly missed the match, but anyway, the whole thing was going on. We played well, and then they scored after something like 75 minutes, and we're looking at each other thinking, "Here we go again." They've put everything into the game, but he made a change after about 65 minutes, 70 minutes, and he brought Niall McGinn on. And Niall McGinn, in the end, we scored 2 in the last 10 minutes. Niall McGinn scored 1 and made 1. And that was it. The belief, that was the first result of that group. And to me, that was the moment, because the belief that it gave the players, that was the first time ever that any Northern Ireland team had come from a goal down to win a competitive match away from home. First time ever. Didn't happen during John's time, didn't happen 58 time, had never ever happened before. We then beat the Furrows at home. Big Roy Carroll saves a penalty, gets a wee bit of luck, comes out off the post and goes into him. Hoda Grayson win, but all of a sudden, this is the first time ever a Northern Ireland team has won the first 3 matches in a qualifying campaign. And we're sitting in the space of 2 months, we have seen Northern Ireland win twice in competitive matches away from home. That was the same number of competitive wins that we'd watched in the previous 13 years. So all of a sudden, we could be on to something here. I think Northern Ireland, I counted it up because I knew we were coming on. The 2 wins at the start of that group away from home. Before that, it was 3 away competitive wins in 19 years. 1 against Malta and 2 against Liechtenstein. So all of a sudden, you knew something had changed, and it was just like a roller coaster. They lost the 1 game. It was the only game Steve Davis didn't play in, and that big qualification. And the night at home, the night at Windsor Park when we qualified, we went straight to Finland, and they topped the group, and that was incredible. John will tell you form a bond with the lads because you travel with them, and for up until Laurie Sanchez took over, we were in the same hotel. But it meant a lot for us, John, didn't it, to actually see the rewards for them, because they're all such good lads, You're
good lads. You do form a bond. Tell the guys you formed that big a bond that you were trying to get rid of me one time. Do you remember that?
No, I never get rid of you, John.
Oh, you did. You tried.
We were in Slovenia, and we've been talking about, interviewees, and we were blessed with good talkers. You were interviewing players, no matter who they put up, you usually got good radio interviews. 2 of the best over the years were always Stephen Craigan, who's gone into broadcasting, and Aaron Hughes. So we're chatting away about the whole situation and who did you put up, the interview today. I said, "Oh, that's Stephen Craigan today." I said, him and Aaron Hughes, without doubt, when they stop, I could see them as future broadcasters. They would make for great co-commentators. John takes a thick, what do you mean? No, I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying they would make for great co-commentators. No, it's fine. I know what you mean now. So we played Slovenia that night, won the game 1-0. Craig Cathcart put a cross in. Corey Evans scored the goal. We're clinging on for dear life. Won the game 1-0. And Aaron Hughes and Craigan that night were magnificent. The clean sheet kept them at bay. John waited his moment, the end of the commentary. Give him what was going on, I said, John, final thoughts. We said, absolutely magnificent. Craig Cathcart, what a debut. Corey Evans, delighted for him to get the goal. But I have to say, Stephen Craigan and Aaron Hughes were absolutely magnificent and have many, many more years left in them.
Fantastic.
So, lads, we had Jim Magilton on here the other week. And just
Sorry for your trouble.
He can talk. And just thinking about the new manager, who do you think it's going to be?
Oh.
I honestly don't know. You know, I think it's probably between Stephen Robinson and Tommy Wright. I can't see anybody else in the picture at the minute.
What about you, Joe?
I don't think they'll pay the compensation if they have to pay compensation for Stephen Robinson.
No,
I think Ian Barraclough or Tommy Wright.
they may be looking at maybe Ian Barraclough in the sense that they think that he could do a Michael Neal, you know, in the sense that Michael didn't have a lot of experience at management and that. You know, I'm always a wee bit weary about guys that haven't played at the Irish level. Not that their coaching or their management is any less, but players, you know, sometimes look at it, you know, you're always at that disadvantage of, you know, what do you know, where have you played, like, you know, and I think that doesn't help a manager.
Mind you, Mourinho hasn't done too badly.
Oh no, I'm not saying that, you know, that it takes away from their skills. I think it's always something that if things are going well for them, it's not a problem. It's if things don't go well for them that it can be an issue, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the lad knows that himself.
Fair point.
So the big thing we have to remember in all this, Simba, is that this manager, whoever it is 2 wins away from taking us to the European Championship finals. So they've got to get it right.
Right from the start.
One thing that Tommy would have is that he's banked a lot of credit from his playing career, that if things didn't start overly well, I'm not saying that necessarily would be the case, but you've banked yourself a bit of credit and time with, you know, supporters and whatever. But they've got to get it right. I think they could do a lot worse. The people who are going to make this decision, they could do a lot worse than to talk to the senior players and not let the senior players pick the manager, but to talk to the senior players and say, why did it work under Michael? What did he do? What boxes did he tick? What got the best out of that squad? And then when you have that list of things, or you have those characteristics, you then start talking to the candidates from, you know, that position of knowledge, and then you make your decision. But what a chance to take a job!
What do you think, Jerry?
Do you know what? I think my three, it would be between Jim Magilton, Tommy Wright, or Stephen at Motherwell. But again, you know, Jim has been there. He's played games. He's managed at a very high level with Ipswich and done considerably well. The only downside to maybe Jim is that he's been out of management as such, but hasn't been out of coaching, and has done a great job, as I say, in the past. Stephen would probably be your number one candidate, but as Joel says, will they pay the compensation? And then Tommy, you know, managed both at Irish League and obviously in Scotland. So I don't really know enough about Ian. So
the other thing
as
about
you say,
the other thing about Stephen, Jerry, as well, and because I'm very fond of Stephen, and I'm not saying that I don't think he should get the job. I'm just saying for reasons why I don't think he will, and the compensation is one. But the other is as well, like how you form the process. So if you're going to have a process where you're saying, right, we're going to ask everybody to apply and we're going to interview them, that puts him at a disadvantage straight away because he's in a job. He can't walk away and say to Motherwell, right, I'm applying for this job, but if I don't get it, I'll come back and see you. He can't do that. So if that's how they're going to form the process, it effectively rules him out before it's even started.
Yeah, 100%. I suppose Tommy would be the front runner at the minute, not being in a job, and just recently come out of it. But as I say, you can't go past Jim. Also, he's got to be 3 in the hat. But I do think it's got to be someone who's played before. I don't think they should bring in someone from a different country, because they've tried it before, and apart from maybe Larry Sanchez, it didn't really work with anyone else.
Yeah. Okay, lads, we're going to move on to our regular feature. And as golfers, then, I want to know who your famous four ball will be, dead or alive. So go ahead, Joel. You start this time.
This is very difficult for me because you asked me about famous four ball, alive or dead, you'd take to the clubhouse for a drink.
Yeah.
So, so I didn't pick any golfers. Well, I'd have picked one golfer. I'd have picked three others. So he's been mentioned before in the pros at Seve. I would love time with Seve, just in his company, to talk to him, to hear what he has to say. An absolute legend and icon. Sir Alex has to be there, Jerry, just in case you call in.
Yeah.
We'll have to bring.
I'll be down. Yeah, if it's at Manga, I'll be down.
I would have Eric Morecambe there because you need a few laughs.
Funny man.
And Peter Sellers gets an invite, but only if he comes as Inspector Clouseau. For the for post golf drinks, because I have probably snapped about 3 clubs during the round, so I'll need cheering up. So that's why Eric Morecambe and Peter Sellers.
Brilliant, very good, John. What about you, John?
I didn't.
I'm going to be a wee bit bored in the sense that there's well, maybe do them justice that they're friends of mine, relatives, celebrities or famous, but I've already played with my 4-ball. It was actually in the Manga a couple of years ago, and it was Liam Beckett, Jimmy Nicholl, and John Lennon. 3 of the funniest men. I'll tell you a story about Jimmy Nicholl. Jimmy Nicholl is, everybody knows how funny John Lennon and Liam, Liam just keeps you going. But Jimmy Nicholl is the funniest man I've ever met. When we were playing, you didn't have the internet, you had nothing to do at nights in hotels, you made your meal last all night because there was nothing else to do. You used to sit and tell stories, and Jimmy was basically like an entertainment officer, and he'd come up with all sorts of little games, and I know he actually is still doing it with Michael and the boys at the minute, because he would tell us that we quizzing all last night, it's great, So we used to do that when we were playing, and he used to give you cryptic clues to football teams, something like, a dark stretch of water would be Blackpool, little things like that, sort of anecdotes. And we were playing in the Home Internationals the end of one year, and it was like the week after the season had ended. It went on for about 10 days. So all through that week, they'd been giving us all these clues, and the boys were loving it. Towards the end of the week, he was running short of clues. Come on, Jimmy, gives another one. So he's thinking about it, and then he comes up and he says, "I've got one now, guys." He says, "Kicking the bollocks," So we're all sitting there going, could not think of what it was like, and at the end of the day we said, "Jimmy, we give up. What's the answer?" He says, "Wrexham." So we're then going to the game against Scotland, and Billy was a stickler for team meetings. You had to be in the team room right on the time for the meeting. So we're sitting in the room, and the only person that's not there is Jimmy. And he said to John McVeigh, our physio, John was a physio at Leicester with me, and he said, "John, go and see where Jimmy is." So John goes out of the room, he looks up the corridor of the hotel, and Jimmy's in the phone box. And it was one of the glass ones, the glass sides and all, so John could see him in the phone box. And as he looks down, Jimmy looks down, and John's waving, So Jimmy sticks his head out the side of the phone box, still got the phone to his ear, and John's going, "Jimmy, team meeting now." And Jimmy goes, "Give us a clue, what division are they in?"
With Jimmy being an entertainment officer, like we near enough had our own when we were on tour in Fullerton, Jackie, and there was a night in Sweden. Ian Dennis of 5 Live, John and myself and Ian had been out together one night, and there was always one night in the trip we'd have tried to get everybody together. So it was going to be the next night. So John and I are sitting, and Ian says, "Here, by the way, lads," he said, "I was doing a game the other week, nearly sure he said it was Middlesbrough or something." He said, "I've got this great thing. Have you come across it? It's called AQA." So what's that? He says, "Any question answered." He said, he says, "I was doing the game and I wasn't sure of something, and you can text a question to this number AQA, and it'll send you the answer. It'll text you the answer back." So I said, "That's brilliant." Here, John, what about you? So, how many times did John O'Neill play for Northern Ireland? Bump off the AQA. Answer comes straight back. John O'Neill was in 2 World Cup squads, played 39 times for Northern Ireland. Had successful
scored 2 goals.
Had 2 goals, yeah.
Including Leicester City, blah, 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 goes on. You see, so that's brilliant. So then the mind starts to work and think, tell you what, you could have some great crack with Fullerton, knowing how Jackie is, you know. So in my phone, I changed Ian Dennis's number to capital A, Q, small a, and put the real AQA number in as all capitals. So following night, we're all out. Deno knows what's coming. It's only the 3 of us in on it. Deno has a few pre-prepared replies, you know. So we're all sitting around the table. So the 3 of us, and then Darren Fullerton, Jackie's son's there. Albert could have been, I don't know, there's about 8 or 10 around the table. Nobody else knows this is coming. So Jackie's beside me. So I said, "Jackie, by the way, we're out with Deno last night. Do you know those, you're doing a comedy, maybe there's something you're not sure of?" And Jackie being Jackie, "No." So, we're we mere mortals, you know, but you know, the thing you're not sure of, this thing answers questions. Like, where do you see this? So to the real AQA number, Jackie's beside me, I'm showing him it says AQA at the top of the phone. How many times did John O'Neill play for Northern Ireland? Bang, send it to the real AQA. Answer comes back, John O'Neill, blah, 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 39 times. And I know exactly what he's like. So I just show him it, take the phone, set the phone down. 10, 15 seconds, Jackie. "It must have heard of me." I knew it was coming. Jackie, sure, you're right. So I take it out to Ian Dennis's number, which is in my phone as AQA. "What can you tell me about Jackie Fullerton?" Bang, send it off. Reply comes back. One Deno under the desk, AQA at the top of it. "Who? Question mark. Jackie's not happy. I said, "Maybe you just need to give it some more detail, Jackie." So, "What can you tell me about Northern Ireland sports broadcaster Jackie Fullerton?" Send it to Deno. Bang, send it off. A bit more detail probably help Jackie. Yes, I would have thought so. "It must have heard of me." Deno under the desk, bang, bang again, AQA at the top of the screen. "Never heard of him. However, we have heard of Mark Sidebottom, Denise Watson, and Joel Taggart, who are considered to be the leading sport broadcasters at BBC Ireland. Well, it's fantastic." And he was stressful, and everybody around the table killing themselves laughing. With 3 days before we told them it was a wind-up.
Oh, fantastic.
Brilliant. I tell you what, an absolute star. And people who don't know Jackie, he is one of the funniest people and has such a dry wit. But, you know, taking the hand out of himself is
Joel,
something he loves.
do you remember the time we went to the Manga with Tommy and Jackie on the was it the South Course?
Big Tommy's a decent golfer. You remember Ballyclare, and Tommy's playing this par 5, and we're on the South Course. Great tee shot, goes for the green in 2, and he hits a second into the bunker. So, it's unlucky. Tommy, you know, really close guy, struck it well. Yeah, I'm in the buggy with John. Jackie's in the buggy with Tommy. But Jackie's lost his ball. He's picked up. He's standing with the scorecards, you know, on the green. The Tommy's in the bunker. Just swoosh, all the sand comes out. No sign of the ball. The Hamlet moment, you know. Next thing, swoosh again. Tommy thins it out of the bunker, straight through the green in 4, and he's now on the next tee box. 5, chips it back through the green, back into the bunker where he started. Right. 6, back out of the bunker. 2 putts, rolls it in for an 8. Right. So, silence. Absolute. Big Tommy's about to blow a gasket. Nobody says anything. I'm standing biting the knuckle. Jackie's standing with a scorecard and a pen. Jackie pipes up. He says, "Tommy, how many was that? I lost count." Tommy says, "It was an 8, Jackie. And you know what? I was going to lift my ball, and I saw you all standing there chuckling with your wee shoulders going. I thought, I'm going to stand and make them and wait until I finish this whole out."
Well, Jackie's my new best friend. I have to stick up for him.
Oh, listen, some man.
Legend.
Yeah.
Jackie, I think we're in the wrong game.
Simba, do you know Billy?
Do
you know? Have you had Billy Hamilton on at any stage, Simba?
Not yet.
Oh, he's
Not
one
yet.
to have on. He's what a tourist he was. Went to Finland for a game, and Jackie didn't like to go too far. You know, like the royal family, everything had to be mapped out for him. Just nearby, didn't travel too far. There were about 8 or 9 of us, and we're all walking around Helsinki, and we're trying to find a restaurant on the first night. Billy Hamilton. No, don't fancy that one. No, I don't fancy that one. So we're all chatting. Billy's checking every restaurant back out. Perhaps with the 7th or 8th restaurant, and Jackie's saying, "Any chance of getting into one of these restaurants?" Another 2 or 3. At about the 11th or 12th restaurant, Billy checks the menu. Jackie's not happy at this point. Billy says, "No, happy enough. We'll go in here. The Cell Magner's in here." Billy, let me get this right. All of these restaurants, you should be looking at the food. You've been looking for Magner's. Absolutely, Jackie. Yes.
By the way, you are brilliant at taking off Jackie Footer. You're brilliant at it.
Thank you. That's right. Thank you.
But what I was saying there earlier is, Jackie Flynn, we're in the wrong game. He's here jet setting around the world having a ball.
Definitely. Yeah. Boys, before you go, I was telling Debbie that you were going to be on the show tonight. She says, "Oh, that'll be an absolute fantastic. 2 of the nicest men that she's ever met. They looked after last 2 years ago at your wedding, Joel." So she would have told me off if I didn't give her a mention.
But Debbie's rarely wrong, isn't she? Like,
She's like, always.
Fantastic.
well, Caroline said the same about Simba, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's
The other one would be good to get a hold of if you can is Derek Spence. Absolute scream, isn't he, Joe?
Oh, he is.
Brilliant. Well, here, we heard Jimmy Nicholl at the Football Leaders a couple of years ago, and honest to God, we were wetting ourselves. He was absolutely brilliant.
I'll tell you, it's just one after the other. Like, you know, he really was good crack, you know, I have to say.
Well,
I was telling the story there last week. We did a little piece on the Home International one in 1980. Danny brought me in the squad. I think it was about 1978. Brought me in. I was still at Loughborough at the time. Obviously, I was playing with Leicester, as said earlier. It was a non-contract player. And we met up in, I think it was in Chester, was it Manchester? Well, anyway, wherever it was, we're in the hotel. And I think it was only about the second time that I'd been in the squad. And when you're at the table, or usually if people want things signed, they bring shirts or autograph books or balls. They would start at one end of the table, give it to somebody, and then it was always passed around the table and come right back around to the end again. So we're sitting having a meal one night, and the waitress comes over, and she's got an autograph book, and she puts it down in front of me. So I signed the autograph, like, you know, and then I went to pass it. I think it was Chris Nicholl was beside me. To pass it to Chris to sign it. And she says, no, only want your autograph, you know. And I'm going, what the hell do you want my autograph for? I don't think I'd made the first team at Leicester, you know. And I'm thinking, this is really strange, you know. So anyway, she takes the autograph book back off me. She looks at the autograph. She goes, "You're not Sammy McElroy." I never said I was Sammy McElroy. So she said to me, she says, "Well, I told my husband that the Northern Ireland team were in the hotel tonight, and he said to me, he says, get Sammy McElroy's autograph." And I'm going, "Well, why did you ask me?" She says, "Well, I have no idea who Sammy McElroy is." So I asked that fellow over there who was Sammy McElroy, pointed to Jimmy Nicholl. She'd asked Jimmy Nicholl who Sammy McElroy was, and he So that was Jimmy through and through.
Absolutely.
It was great that Jimmy was part of the whole experience at the Euros as well, you know, in the coaching staff for Michael. And, you know, him there and being a part of it, that sort of link between, you know, the 82, 86 team and then the Euros with Michael. He's still at it, you know, with the players, and still all his wee jokes and all around the squad. He's just one of those infectious people, you know. It's just great to have around the place.
He was a great player as well, Joel. He was a better player than people.
I can play too.
You know, as I was saying the other day, I played 39 times for Northern Ireland, and I would say that 36 of those had Jimmy Nicholl and Mal Doherty as my two fullbacks, you know, and either Big John, Alan, God rest him, or Chris Nicholl as a centre half, you know. And I was telling this to the boys a story when Danny brought me into the squad. He put me in the room with Chris Nicholl, and he said, I'll put you in with him. He says, he'll teach you how to play the game. And he did. Tough as nails, one of the best centre halves. You would remember, Jerry, what a player, you know. And it was in the day, you know, when the game had to be physical. And I've seen him up against guys like, you know, that I would, you know, try and stay away from, you know. But he was tough. And the other guy who was really tough at those times as well was Billy Hamilton. Because I remember we played, after the 82 World Cup, we went to Mallorca. Jerry had got his move to Real Mallorca, and we went to the islands. I think it's the first time that Spain had taken a game to the islands they played rather than being on the mainland. And it was just a friendly. And we were sitting in the team room, just waiting to leave to go to the hotel. And at that time, Gorkachea, the butcher of Bilbao, and Matheda were the two centre halves, and Matheda was about 6'4", like, you know, felt like a shit house, like, you know. So Billy then says, right, we're talking about who's picking up from corners, like, you know, and he's going, who's picking up Matheda, and that got me, like, you know. And Billy sticks his hand up, and I'm like, thank God for that, like, you know. So he gets to the game, the first corner, Billy picks him up, and I happened to look around before they took the corner, and they're knocking 6 bells out of one another. Billy Hamilton was another tough guy as well to play against.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, lads, I've been trying to end this for 15 minutes. It's like Columbo. just one more story.
Oh, I'll tell you, so you could go on, Joe, couldn't you? A million stories, you know.
We didn't even get the Euros.
Oh, I know. You want to hear the trip at Denise?
I have to say, John and I have actually gone dark. You two have been talking that long.
But what about coming to the Manga? We all saying, do you play golf?
Very badly.
You'll fit in well then.
I've told him he needs to come over.
I have to say, I'm a bit better than Jerry Flynn, but I'm not great.
Well, Jerry already told me he's going to come down and see us in September, John, so that's the bad news. I mean, that's the good news.
Right,
Fingers crossed, Joe, this clears.
Sorry, I said we'll make that a date.
I think that's a plan.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, look, lads, Jerry and I have absolutely loved this. As usual, two smashing guests, and we really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us on. It's been great.
The pleasure.
Spoken to midnight here, the way things are going.
Hey, we haven't even told you about the trip to Paris. I swear to God.
That's for part 2 of this, John.
That's even better, you know. I mean, like, the Euros, the games were brilliant. Outside of the games, the trip was an absolute freaking nightmare.
We'll see you back for La Manga.
We'll do.
Fantastic. Lads, thank you very much. It's been a
pleasure, Jerry.
Pleasure having you on. Thank you. Smashing John. See you in September, hopefully.
Okay, see you soon.
Thanks,
See you in September.
Get that party bus ready.
It will indeed. Gonna stack up with you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Speak to you soon.
Bye.